to amend on the approval of the agenda?
No, we do not, Mr. Mayor.
I'll entertain motion.
This is Silva. Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, sir.
Stockton, I second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sullivan?
Yes.
Mayor Roulette?
Yes. We'll move to item 4, approval of the minutes. I'll entertain motion.
This is Silva. Approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sullivan?
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Mayor Roulette?
Yes. Item 5, presentations. I see none. Item 6, consent calendar. Anybody from the council that would like to pull anything off the consent tonight? I see no hands. Anybody from the public that would like to pull anything off the consent calendar tonight? I see no hands. I'll close public comment, entertain motion for the consent calendar.
Motion to approve.
This is Silva. Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sullivan?
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Yes.
Mayor Roulette?
Yes. Thank you. We will move to item 7, business from the floor. This is the time set aside to address any comments from the public that are not on the agenda, but are within the council's subject matter jurisdiction. I do have one hand. Last 3 are 419. Go ahead and let the caller in, please. Caller, are you there?
Yeah, hello. This is Doug Chen with Discovery Builders. And
Yes,
the mayor and council members, just want to let you know that I sent a letter in dated October 26th, today's date, to give you an update on our application on the North Village project. We submitted an application to amend the North Village specific plan. And the primary purpose is to reserve a school site in the north part of North Village because VUSD elected not to acquire the site that we previously reserved in the south half of North Village. So it's just a quick update in the letter. And I do want to let the public know that if they would like to receive any additional information or receive updates, they can email northvillage@discoveryhomes.com. That's all I have.
thank you very much. I see no other hands from the public. I will close public comment. And we will continue on with the agenda. Apologize. So we will move to item 8A, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This first item is the introduction of an ordinance relating to mandating electronic and paperless filing for the Fair Political Practices Commission campaign. Our City Clerk, Michelle Thornbrew, will be providing you with a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. Before you tonight is a request to add a chapter to the Vacaville Municipal Code in order to start providing and receiving campaign and conflict of interest statements electronically, eliminating the requirement for filers to provide a paper copy, and establishing a repository for filings in accordance with FPPC and Secretary of State standards. First, I want to note that in the staff report, a reference was made to AB 571, which should have been AB 2151. Both bills were signed together and went into effect on January 1st of this year. AB 2151, oh, can we go to the next slide, please, Crystal? Thank you. AB 2151 requires local agencies to post all campaign filing reports online within 72 hours of the deadline to submit reporting statements. Previous to this, campaign statements were to be made available to the public on location at the time of request. With the pandemic and the closure of many government facilities, the statements were not readily available to the public unless they were posted on agencies' websites. AB 2151 was enacted to ensure that the public has access to campaign filings even during closures of facilities. The FPPC has been allowing electronic filing systems for submittal of campaign disclosure statements since 2013, as long as the systems meet certain criteria outlined in Government Code 84615, which includes adoption of an ordinance to allow electronic filing. Electronic filing systems are a benefit to the public, the filers, and the agency. For the public, besides providing transparency by making statements readily available for viewing, an electronic filing system creates consistency in the format of the statements, making them easier to read and therefore easier to understand. For the filer, the system provides ease of use by having interactive instructions and guides as to what is required to be entered in each category while the filer is filling out the statement. It also acts as a repository for filed statements, which assists the filer in keeping track of and readily accessing previously submitted information and for making any required amendments to the filing. Electronic systems save time for staff through ease of notification systems to filers of their filing requirements, in protecting, retaining, and providing archive statements as required by statute, and in the processing, redacting, and posting of filed statements as required by 2151. Prior to a paper copy being posted on the city's website, the report must be reviewed for completeness, and all addresses and any bank account numbers listed on the forms must be redacted. Every year, campaign committees must report semi-annually or 2 times per year. However, during an election season, there are accelerated filing requirements, adding 4 extra filing dates and 24 and 48-hour reporting requirements for certain contributions. As an example, there were 122 disclosure statements submitted for the November 2020 election. Next slide, please. To implement an electronic filing system for campaign disclosure statements in accordance with FPPC's requirements, the council must adopt an ordinance that states that the city clerk will operate the electronic filing system in compliance with the requirements of Government Code Section 84615 and any other applicable laws, including that the city designates that the filings received electronically by the city clerk's office as a filings of record for the city, that the system will operate securely and effectively, will be available to the public to view filings, will be at no cost to filers, will not place an undue burden on filers, and will include procedures for filers to comply with the requirement that they sign statements and reports under penalty of perjury. Next slide, please. To achieve the requirements of the FPPC for electronic filing, the city would implement a system provided by NetFile. NetFile is a well-known system for electronic filing used by over 90% of cities that allow electronic filing of campaign reporting statements. They are currently offering their solution for filing FPPC required forms, including campaign disclosure statement and statement of economic interest form 700s, at no charge through the remainder of the fiscal year. The system meets the requirements of both the Secretary of State and FPPC for electronic filing. And since there was a component included for electronic filing of Form 700 Statement of Economic Interest, staff is recommending that Council also include that these filings be mandated to be filed electronically. In terms of security, the NetFile system is a web-based vendor-hosted application that utilizes the same data encryption as online bankings. NetFile stores and backs up data at 3 separate locations, creating essential safety measures and redundancy that will allow for recovery of information in the event of an emergency or disaster. The city's data will be retained for the required minimum 10-year period on the online filing system. Reports that are subject to permanent retention will be archived in a secure format after the 10-year period. NetFile is able to receive uploaded data from many types of third-party applications if filers have already retained professional treasurers that have campaign software. NetFile will include initial and continued training to filers and committees and includes updates to registered filers when changes occur in filing requirements. As previously noted, the NetFile system also includes electronic filing of Statement of Economic Interest Form 700s. Adding the requirement for filers identified in the city's Conflict of Interest Code to file electronically would assist staff in tracking compliance and retrieval of these filings. And while filers under Government Code Section 87200 file the Form 700 directly with the FPPC through their electronic system, there are occasions where Form 700s are required by other agencies that the FPPC is not connected to, and this would provide those filers another option for filing with those agencies. Next slide, please. Staff recognizes that there may be occasional instances where electronic filing is not achievable, and the city clerk will be able to take a paper filing in lieu of an electronic filing. However, inability to provide an electronic filing does not absolve filers of their requirement to file, and failure to provide a paper filing or electronic filing by the required filing deadline will still incur filing penalties. Next slide, please. So, given that the city has the opportunity to utilize the NetFile system at no charge for the remainder of the fiscal year, that the system provides for all criteria of Government Code 84615, and that the enactment of an electronic filing system will improve transparency, accuracy, and efficiency, staff recommends that the council by title only introduce the subject ordinance. Next slide. So that concludes the presentation, and at this time I'm happy to answer any questions or receive comments.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll open it up for public comment. I see no hands up. I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for comments or motion. I see Councilmember Silva's hand up. Councilmember Silva.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Michelle. Thanks for all the tremendous work that you do and sifting through all that paperwork. Is there an option to allow for both paper and electronic filing? So it would be up to the candidate and still fulfill.
So yes, one of the alternatives that the council could decide to do is to allow electronic filing, but not mandate it.
And that's what we have currently?
We currently do not have the ability to accept electronic filing because we need the ordinance in order to accept electronic filing.
I understand. And then it's 6,800 per year for each year up to 5 years?
Correct.
And the other question is, so I guess really just my main concern is just if we're only requiring electronic documents, I understand that we weren't allowed to receive those, but I think from an equitable standpoint, there's a lot of folks that may have trouble submitting online. And I think just my experience in these type of issues in the past, part of it's just clarity on the actual form on what we're supposed to fill out or what a new candidate's supposed to fill out. So for me, I'd like to maybe hear thoughts from the rest of the council, but I'd like to have both options, both paper and electronic access to file. But sorry, and one more question, that 6,800 is still going to be in a non-election year, correct?
Yes, that would be our fee regardless of what type of year we're in.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Wiley.
Thank you for the presentation also. Just two questions that I had. So I know a lot of people do look at these documents. So if people were looking for them, they would just be in the same place, like under the elections thing by candidate, and it would just all be there. You wouldn't have to enter it in because the NetFile program would be there. Is that correct?
Correct.
So basically it would be easily found by the public is what I'm asking.
Yes, it would be easier actually to find, I believe. It would be categorized a little easier. Our staff has struggled with how to categorize candidates versus elected officials. The amount of filers increases during the election time because most candidates have campaign committees. After the election, many of those candidates that did not succeed to be elected close their campaign accounts. So there are less filers after an election. And so separating elected officials' filings from candidate filings has been a little bit of a struggle for our staff in-house. This system makes it searchable by name, by election year, and by a lot of different criteria so that it makes it easier for the public to view and see what they're looking for.
But so if we do this, then for 10 years, there will be information up there. So, I mean, so that if you put in the person's name, then you'd be able to find their report from whichever year as long as it's up there, I guess, so.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and then my second question was, this is real important because oftentimes, you think you send it or you hit submit, but something happens and things don't go. So I did read in the print, I'm not sure that you mentioned this, that each time you submit something, you will get a confirmation saying that you submitted the paperwork. Is that correct? Correct.
You will get a confirmation and it'll tell you the date and time it was received, and that will be the exact date and time of the filing.
All right. And then you, from the city clerk's office, would notify a candidate who hadn't filed a timely report and say, your report is late, now file it. Is that correct?
Yes, and this will assist us in that because it'll be able to generate a really quick report for us, and then based off that, it'll automatically be able to shoot out an email to that person's contact email. So it will simplify that process for us as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you. Will this be accessible in different languages, both to fill out and for the community to search online?
That's a good question that I don't have the answer to right away.
Okay,
I can get that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay.
Councilmember Silva, did you want to make a motion? I would agree that we should leave it open for both paper and for filing. You asked for comments, so that would be my comment.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll make a motion that we put an ordinance that allows electronic filing, but also paper filing as well.
And about the 700 form, can you include that if that's something you'd like to do?
Including the Form 700, all the forms associated.
Is that clear, Mrs. City Clerk?
Yes, so if that is the motion, it would be to bring back an amended introduction for that direction.
Perfect. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Mayor Roulette?
Okay, we'll move to item 8B, Mr. City Manager. Oh, excuse me, we don't have an 8B. How about 9A? I apologize.
No problem. Thank you, sir. So this next item is a presentation for approval of the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce's annual program of work and acceptance of their annual progress report. Don Burris, our Director of Economic Development Services, has a brief presentation for you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mayor Roulette, Vice Mayor Sullivan, and members of the City Council. Don Burris, Director of Economic Development Services here. This evening, the Council is being asked to accept and approve the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce Program of Work, Annual Progress Report, and authorize the payment of the annual membership fee of $54,424.17. The city of Vacaville and the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce has a long history of collaborating to help maintain a healthy local economy, and our collaboration continues as the chamber will be assisting the Economic Development Department in the implementation of several action items identified in the COVID-19 economic recovery strategy. The Vacaville Chamber provides numerous resources for the business community and has an extensive work program that helps to keep our local economy growing. I will now turn the presentation over to Debbie Egidio, President and CEO of the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce, who will share with you the progress of the chamber has made over the past year and what work lies ahead for the chamber in 2022. Debbie.
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor and City Council members, as well as city staff and our public audience this evening. As Don said, my name is Debbie Egidio. I'm President and CEO of the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce. And tonight I'll be giving you an overview of the chamber, a description of the activities we've performed in the past fiscal year in support of our service agreement with the city, and a look forward into 2021 to 2022. Next slide, please. The Chamber of Commerce is a 501c6 membership-based organization with an all-volunteer board of directors from throughout our community. Our current membership base is 385 businesses that span the spectrum of business types, everything from independent associates to home-based entrepreneurs to small businesses to our large employers. And the reasons that businesses join the chamber are as unique and varied as the businesses themselves. Primarily, though, this is for marketing, networking, education, leadership development, and business advocacy. Next slide. Chamber is comprised of several committees that are tasked with different function areas of the chamber in order to help us stay focused on those tasks as well as perform the different services that we provide. You can see these listed here, but briefly, the ambassadors are our volunteers who assist us with events in our membership outreach, our Business Issues and Advocacy Committee, which monitors and evaluates and acts on issues that will be affecting businesses, everything from the local level up to national participation on that. Our Business Resources Committee focuses on our education and our workforce development, particularly programs with our Solano County Office of Education. Fundraising and events is pretty self-explanatory, but this is our networking area of the chamber and also where we generate our non-dues income. Our membership committee provides input on recruitment of new members as well as retention of existing members and monitors our membership categories and programs. Young Professionals of Vacaville is a very active group for the chamber, and they are empowering our next generation of business leaders, focusing on professional development, networking, and community involvement. We also, with the Fairfield Sassoon Chamber of Commerce, put together the Traverse Regional Armed Forces Committee, better known as TRAF, which supports the men, women, and mission of Travis Air Force Base. And we also have a Business and Political Action Committee that is separate from the chamber with a separate funds that is focused on endorsing candidates and issues that favor business. Next slide. This is just a brief overview of groupings of our income and expenses for the 2020-21 fiscal year. You can see that most of our income is strongly based on our membership. Also, our city contract is an important part of our funding. And you'll also notice on the income a negative for write-offs, that green graph bar there. Write-offs for us are members and membership dues that can't be collected either because a business is having financial difficulties or has closed. It was particularly impactful in this last fiscal year with COVID. And our expenses are pretty typical of most small businesses. We, of course, have staffing expenses and rent and operations, along with all the other things that are necessary for us to operate. We were very fortunate in this last fiscal year, though, to keep a balanced budget and even generate a small net profit. Some of that was in part to the California Relief Grant, but also to carefully managing our expenses. Next slide. Our service contract with the city is broken down into basically 5 different areas of business services. And I will be going through each of those, giving you a brief idea of what we did in support of those services in the last year. Next slide. First of those is promoting and supporting our local businesses. And we did some unique things last year that were different than typical operations, again, because of COVID impacts. We did implement a chamber grant program to assist our businesses with membership dues, a business bingo program to drive business out to our members, and along those same lines, a dinner for two promotion that helped drive business specifically to our local restaurants. A great program that continues into this year and has for several years now is the Genentech Goes to Town program, which we do in partnership with Genentech, and it provides annually roughly 17,000 plus or minus in grants to small and local businesses. And then our young professionals of Vacaville, again, the YPB, have continued to do their Munchie of the Month, which is driving traffic to local restaurants, while at the same time raising funds for their charity of the year, which this year is CASA of Solano County. Next slide. Professional networking and connecting was very challenging during COVID because we had to go virtual like most other businesses and organizations. But we did work on expanding participation in chamber committees. Typically that's been just board members, but we really worked hard at engaging more of our business professionals so they have a better understanding of the chamber and potentially can be board members in coming years. Again, TRAF with Travis Air Force Base was also one of our continuing networking activities, and that was with participation not only from base leaders, but community leaders from throughout the entire county. YPB continued their networking happy hours virtually at first. Now they're back to in-person. And we were thrilled to be able in June hold our first in-person event in over a year, which was our Night of Champions annual dinner, one of our major fundraisers and networking events, and where we honor our board of directors as well as our business, public servant, ambassador, and YPB, of the year. And I'd like to just on the side say thank you to Mayor Roulette for emceeing that event for us. It was a real privilege to have you there for that. Next slide. Workforce development is one of the key tasks for the chamber, and we work on that continually throughout the year. Last year we held a virtual job fair. We have had in-person in the past. We also work with our Solano County Office of Education on their Work Ready certification program, which is just an amazing program for high school students to prepare themselves to enter the workforce. We held our Employee of the Year luncheon virtually, recognizing outstanding employees. They had to be nominated by their employer, and that was a great citywide event for us. We also established the Vacaville Chamber Educational Foundation, which is a 501c3, and this was to provide scholarships for high school graduates and adult learners returning to school. And I'm really excited to say that we'll be handing out our first scholarships next Thursday at our mixer. We have 2 award winners we're real happy about. And then also we maintain a job site, vacaworks.com, that is a resource for both employers and job seekers, and members of the chamber can provide postings of job openings for free on that site. Next slide. Economic development, again, one of the key and heart of what the chamber does and assists with city's efforts on this. We did an economic development update webinar with the staff last December. We've also engaged with city staff through our business issues committee to stay abreast of city projects and goals. And I want to really thank Tim and Don for their participation on this committee. It's a key resource for us to be able to have that direct communication and work together with you. We continue meetings with the Big Four, which is the city of Vacaville, Vacaville Chamber, Visit Vacaville, and Downtown Vacaville. And we partner on different efforts to boost what we do individually so that we can bring better increased business for Vacaville. Example of that was the partnerships we formed for the Small Business Week last month with different activities and to promote shopping local. And we also continue to meet with the city's Economic Development Advisory Committee. Next slide. And the last of the 5 points of our service agreement is information and outreach services. Through these, we are trying to bring not just to our business members, but to the citizens of Vacaville, a greater connection with the business community and with the city. We've conducted candidates forums for both city council and school board. We continue to host a series of Meet Your City Council town hall forums. We have just a couple more to wrap up on that. We also did a survey of our chamber membership, somewhat of a business retention effort to listen to and discover topics of interest and concern for our businesses. Not only do we hold town hall forums with city council, but we were fortunate to have one with Congressman Garamendi as well. One of our first in-person outreach efforts, we were able to participate in the Dia de las Madres Community Resource Fair at Trower Park. And all throughout COVID, we maintained an information and resource webpage as part of our chamber website. And we continue to work with Solano SBDC on funding and resources and educational programs for businesses. Next slide. Looking forward into our next fiscal year, which we're actually already 1 quarter into at this point, we're looking to revive our in-person major events and monthly mixers, as well as our education and resource forums. And I want to take this moment to say thank you to the city council and the staff that have been attending our functions. Again, that interaction with our community is priceless for us. We also are investing more in our marketing communication tools so that we can better reach our businesses and our community members. Again, as I mentioned, we continue to work with the County Office of Education on workforce development. Our major program there is the Inspire Exploratory Career Fair for our 8th grade students, which was postponed this fall, but we plan on having in the spring again. With Solano SBDC, something that's recently come up is our YPV have been partnering with them on creating an entrepreneurs roundtable. I know that's a goal of the city's economic recovery plan, as well as a good program for our business community in Vacaville. And then last but not least, we will be working with the city of Vacaville on the creation and implementation of a small business retention outreach plan. This will be a new task added to our service agreement that we're excited to work on with the city. And we'll be working to define our target business segments and include quantitative goals and consistent means for gathering information through this project. And I believe we'll be able to input into the city's database program directly the efforts of these outreach meetings so that the city has that information at their fingertips. Next slide. And I just want to take a moment to look forward. I know this is an agenda item coming up tonight, just in discussion on the ARPA funding. And there are several items there you'll see the Chamber of Commerce's name attached to. So I just wanted to briefly review those. Shop Local Vacaville, I don't think I have to inform you on it. I know that the city has been working hard on getting this program off the ground. And once it is, the Chamber is looking to manage that program for you. To keep the website robust, to make sure that the businesses are fully utilizing it, and also to market the site, which will be important for usage as well. Also in the ARPA request is the Starting Your Business in Vacaville guidebook. We've done this in the past, but we are out of supply. This was a project we did with the city. Our hope this time is to expand that book, refresh it, make it current, and also print it both in English and Spanish. Innovation Summit and Entrepreneurs Expo would be a county-wide participation event. We would open that up not just to our local businesses, but county-wide so that we can really get some synergy between the activities and projects that are happening throughout Solano County, and bring in SBDC as well to help with funding resources and other information that would be critical for new businesses. I mentioned our scholarship program. We put in a request for funds for that so that we can keep that going and help out our future workforce. And then lastly, the Business Accelerator Program would be a project we would be able to implement if we were to receive the Community Navigator Grant, which was a joint grant application with 8 other organizations throughout the county, including Visit Vacaville and Downtown Vacaville, with SBDC as the hub organization for that. And next and last slide. And at this point, I just want to say thank you for your time, for your continued partnership over the years. I really value our relationship with the city and the interaction and discussions we're able to have. And thank you on behalf of our board of directors that's there. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I'm going to first open up to public comment. I see no hands up. I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to Councilmember Ritchie.
Oh, hello, Debbie. First and foremost, I just want to congratulate you on the amazing presentation, and also congratulate you on taking the role as CEO and the chamber. The sheer amount of kind of activities and bullet points you just spoke of is just, it really speaks to how important the Chamber of Commerce is for small business entrepreneurs. And just being one myself, it was really inspiring hearing how many things you guys are doing in the community and what needs to be done. And I really appreciate everything you guys do. It was simply amazing to see how many activities you're doing. And just, I really appreciate all the effort of you and your team, and whatever we can do to support you, I'm there. I understand how important it is to have support resources as a small business, especially over the last year. And I really just appreciate everything that's due, and just please let us know how we can help.
Thank you.
Okay, next hand up was Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Mayor. Debbie, great presentation tonight. And honestly, I really want to make sure I express my thanks for you coming out on Mother's Day to help support the De las Madres event earlier this year. Making sure that people know how to tap into their entrepreneur spirit and how to create a business that not only just helps provide a service to our community, but in return can help find a way and navigate a different way for them to provide for their family is something that cannot be understated. So I definitely want to continue to extend my appreciation for that. Shop Local Vacaville, I think that's really a key program. Starting your business in Vacaville, that pamphlet, my son constantly looks at it for his own little endeavors. But that Shop Local Vacaville, I think that's a tremendous resource that I'm really appreciative of the council supporting and staff for bringing that up, because we constantly hear, hey, how can I support local businesses? I don't know quite where to go. And that is to me, it can be a very powerful marketing tool as long as we continue all of us continue to advertise and market that, so our folks know where to go to support our local businesses. So just looking for some feedback. Are there any systemic improvements that I think you kind of maybe alluded to it? Are there any improvements on behalf of Chamber that you guys are looking at in addition to helping address moving forward, or maybe want us to be aware of?
I think
on how to support small businesses.
Yeah, I think I was able to provide that in the presentation. I think every business right now is going through a little bit of a reinventing year. I think if COVID did anything positive for us, it was a chance to really evaluate our business and see how we can do things either more efficiently or better or differently. And I will beg off a little bit on my newness into the position that I'm working on that. The business retention program, of course, would be a big, important piece of what we're doing moving forward. We're also looking at adding a part-time staff member to work on our membership outreach and retention as well, hopefully in the next month or so.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Roberts.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for the presentation. It's really informative. I appreciate all you guys do with local businesses. And as we've talked before, I think local business and small businesses are key for sustaining the culture of Vacaville, especially in the downtown area. And all the programs you have currently going, as well as the future ones that you'll be taking on with the city. I appreciate all that. I just had one question since I'm a numbers nerd. For your income expenses, do you have the actual dollar amounts? Because percentages is hard for me to look at and just to see what you guys are working with for the income expense levels.
Yeah, I don't have the dollar amounts at hand, but I can tell you that our total budget is approximately $397,000. So we're just under 400,000. I can do the math based on that on it, but yeah. So, but that gives you, I'm sorry, I don't have those exact numbers, but I think that would give you an overall perspective.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely helps clear stuff up. Good. Yeah, because all the percentages, like, oh, I don't know how much that is or how much they need to keep going and stuff like that. So yeah, appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you. Bye.
Vice Mayor Sullivan.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Udito, just super glad to have you on board, and a big kudos to you and your board. Just over the last couple months, the level of innovation, outreach, and just collaboration with different groups in the community has definitely noticeably increased, and it's making a huge difference. So, I just feel very grateful to you and your board and your organization. I appreciate all of you guys and everything that you do for the city. You are a real cornerstone to the COVID recovery, and also really helping us keep economic development at the forefront in Vacaville. So just a big thank you and kudos to your team.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That's one of the top compliments we could receive as an organization is our partnerships with others.
And before I entertain motion, I also wanted to thank you and your team. Incredible job through this pandemic, something that we've never had to deal with before, and the continued support forever. You know, I've always been a big Chamber of Commerce person. So thank you for everything you do. I'm excited you're there now, as you probably well know. And from that, I'll entertain motion.
I motion to approve.
This is Stockton. I'll second, and great job.
Oh.
Or
Okay, we got a motion, and it sounds like 6 seconds, so we'll go ahead and do roll call.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sullivan?
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton?
yes.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Mayor Roulette?
Aye. We will move on to the next item, 9B, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This next item is an informational item related to the housing element update and the regional housing needs allocation process. Our senior planner, Tyra Hayes, will be giving you a brief presentation.
Thank you, City Manager. As City Manager Bush noted, my name is Tyra Hayes, and tonight I will be giving the City Council a brief presentation on our housing element and its associated regional housing needs allocation process. Next slide, please. So first, we're going to start off with reviewing what a housing element is. The housing element is one of the 7 state-mandated elements or chapters of the city's general plan. The housing element contains the city's policies and programs related to the construction of new housing, the conservation and rehabilitation of existing housing, and the availability of public services for lower income households as well as disadvantaged households. Another key component of our housing element is a detailed inventory of the city's vacant and underutilized residential lands that could be used towards meeting the city's regional housing needs allocation. In addition to this, the housing element differs from the remainder of our general plan in terms of it must be updated every 8 years, and it is subject to review and certification by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Next slide, please. So in addition to all the statutory requirements of our housing elements, the city is also required to prepare and present an annual progress report to both our Planning Commission and City Council on an annual basis. This report is typically given to both bodies in the January to March timeframe of each year. Once we review the annual progress report with these 2 governmental bodies, we then submit the report to HCD, which is once again the California Department of Housing and Community Development. And as part of that report, we have to relay information as identified on standardized forms. These reports really focus on how many residential permits have been issued within the previous calendar year. It also focuses on what the affordability level is of these recently issued residential permits, Typically, staff will review the developer's website to determine what the selling points are, and using some other elements that look at what the county's area median income is for that year, we're able to figure out roughly what the affordability is of each of these homes. In addition to reporting on the permits issued and their affordability, we are also required to report on the status of the various city housing programs and policies as identified within the housing element itself. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned, one of the key components of the housing element really centers around the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA for short. The RHNA is what's considered to be the city's fair share of housing for the state within the reporting period of that housing element cycle. Each housing element cycle is 8 years in duration. And in addition to being able to identify how many residential homes we must prepare for, we must also prepare for these homes based on income levels. We'll talk a little more about this momentarily, but I do want to share with the City Council what the state's objectives are as it relates to the RHNA number itself. The objective of the RHNA is to increase the overall housing supply and housing mix of housing within the city as well as the state as a whole. We are also required to look at ways to promote infill development and to provide equity as it relates to housing opportunities. We also look at how we can better balance both jobs and housing. The reason for this is we are required to look at any type of greenhouse gas emissions that may result from the construction of new housing and or the creation of new jobs. We are also required to look at balancing income distribution. What this means is we must look at how we can provide all types of housing within all regions of the city. That is to say, we are required to look at providing larger lot, single-family residential homes within nearby proximity of more affordable homes and perhaps other types of housing such as apartments and townhomes. And lastly, we are now required to look at what we call affirmatively furthering fair housing. This is a new requirement of the current housing element cycle. And as part of this, the housing elements that will be brought before the City Council next year will be significantly larger than previous years because we are required to look at the demographics of the city as a whole as it relates to not only nationalities, but also to income groups. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a moment to do a little bit of a deep dive on what the RHNA is, given that it truly is the key component of the housing element, and the housing element is essentially based on this concept. So the first question is, where does this magical number come from? So as I mentioned, every 8 years, the state determines how many homes the state must provide in order to meet its needs. So the original number that has been determined originates within the Department of Housing and Community Development. Once that number is determined, it is further divided up amongst what we call the Council of Governments. What that essentially is, it's a division of the state of California into 23 councils of governments that cover specific regions that share certain things in common. Most namely, they are interdependent as it relates to housing, transportation, greenhouse gas emissions, and economics. In the case of Vacaville, we are a part of the Association of Bay Area Governments. So this includes the 9-county Bay Area region. Once ABAG has our numbers, they would then typically directly give that RHNA, or the city's fair share of housing, directly to us, in which we are then required to prepare our housing elements. As previously mentioned, we have to provide the land necessary to provide those opportunities. And we also have to provide both policies and programs that would support that number as well as type of housing. Now, there is the option for local jurisdictions to elect to do what we call a sub-regional housing needs allocation. That's called the sub-RENA. Next slide, please. So under the sub-regional housing needs allocation, a local jurisdiction or a local region may elect to distribute its RENA that is received from the Bay Area Council of Governments, or ABAG, and we can distribute them amongst ourselves. This option allows us to retain a little more local control. The existing housing element cycle, which covers 2015 through the year 2022, it was created with a sub-RENA process. And earlier this year, the City Council also elected to participate in the Solano County sub-RENA process. So we'll talk more about that momentarily. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the ABAG has been given the total number of regional housing needs allocations to Solano County. As a whole, Solano County was allotted just under 11,000 residential allocations. From there, Solano County, as well as the 7 local cities, was required to create its own methodology that was consistent with state law to further divvy up those allocations. The methodology that was adopted by the 4 Cs, which stands for the Cities County Coordinating Council, was based on 4 weighted factors. And those factors were based on their housing and or opportunities for additional housing, jobs, regional planning, and transit connections. From there, we went to the 4 Cs. The 4 Cs approved the methodology, and that methodology, along with the corresponding RENA numbers for each of the jurisdictions, was sent back to the Department of Housing and Community Development for their review and approval. The Solano County sub-RENA did receive approval from ACD, and as a result, in September, the 4 Cs did adopt our current methodology. Next slide, please. The methodology that was approved resulted in the following RENA numbers for the entirety of Solano County as broken down between the 7 Solano County cities and the unincorporated county itself. As you may recall, I mentioned that ABAG had assigned just under 11,000 housing need allocations to Solano County as a whole. And using the approved methodology, the city of Vacaville was allocated just under 2,600 residential units to prepare for in its next housing element, which is just now beginning and is expected to be completed at the beginning of the year 2023. So we are just about at the end of the 45-day appeal period that followed the 4 Cs approval of our proposed methodology. Assuming that no appeals are received, sometime around November, possibly December, the final RENA numbers as shown here on the slide will be taken back to the 4 Cs for their final approval, which will then give us the green light to prepare our housing element based on these allocations. Next slide, please. So the slide before you now shows you what our current RENA is for our current housing element. By way of reminder, our current housing element is set to expire at the very end of 2022, and therefore we must have our new housing element adopted at the beginning of 2023. This slide may look a little familiar to the City Council because this is the slide that was shared with the Council earlier this year as part of our housing element annual progress report. Essentially, what this is telling us is the city has met majority of its RENA for this housing element cycle as it relates to providing housing for moderate income households and above moderate income households. Unfortunately, and very common amongst we are still lacking in meeting our RENA for both very low and low income households. As shown here, we have issued a total of 190 permits for households. However, we still have a shortfall of 302 residential units. Please. To our upcoming housing element. As I mentioned, we have received an allocation just under 2,600 units. What was not shown is how those 2,600 units are broken down by income group. But I did want to show here that breakdown, but also what that truly means as it relates to the income groups. So as the City Council may recall from our previous presentation on the annual progress report, the affordability of residential units within the city is all based on the county's area median income for that calendar year. The area median income as of 2021, as determined by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, is just over $99,000 for a family of four. Based on that, the breakdown of affordability is based on a percentage of the area median income as shown here on the slide. To take it a step further, what we have done here is we have provided what those incomes look like for those households. Next slide, please. So I think I may have mentioned very briefly early in our presentation is significantly more, I'm just going to say complex than previous housing elements because we are required to address more topics than we have in previous housing element cycles. Some of the things that we are now being required to focus on and or expand upon include focusing on low-wage jobs and how we can provide affordability for the workers at those jobs. We are also required to identify households who are overpaying. The state would like us to specifically identify households that are paying more than 30% of their gross household income towards their housing costs. They would also like us to look at households paying more than 50% of their gross income towards housing costs. We are also required to look at and analyze the rate of overcrowding within the city. Essentially what that means is you have typically more people than what's considered average within a residential unit. So in this case, we do see a lot of multi-generational families living together, and or we see a lot of people sharing an apartment in order to be able to make the rent. As I'm sure it makes perfect sense to both the council as well as the viewers, we are required to identify and analyze those units lost due to a state of emergency that have not yet been replaced. As the council may be aware, we did lose quite a few residential homes within Solano County. However, we did not lose any homes within the city of Vacaville as a result of the 2020 fires that occurred last fall. Lastly, as the city council may be aware, we are required to really focus on the region's greenhouse gas emissions and ways to further reduce them in order to meet the state mandates as it relates to reducing greenhouse gases. Next slide, please. So this year, this housing element cycle, the state is requiring a very robust public outreach effort. Specifically, state law states that the housing element is required to provide both meaningful and inclusive public outreach efforts. So the city is currently coming up with ideas on how to further expand our public reach efforts. We are currently working with the consultant group. We are working to get under contract. That would be Placeworks, who is authorized by the City Council to be our consultant at our, I believe, at last month's City Council meeting. And we're also working with the Solano County Housing Collaboration to identify ways that they are furthering their public outreach efforts. Some of those efforts, as identified right now, include doing additional workshops. It's likely that a lot of these workshops will be probably virtual unless things change as it relates to COVID. We will be doing various stakeholder consultations. In that case, we're really going to be reaching out to developers, builders, as well as various housing advocacy groups. We will be holding stakeholder roundtable meetings to find out what developers and or builders need in order to construct these homes. We're going to have numerous planning commission and city council study sessions. And as the city council may be aware, we are also going to be having a housing element subcommittee, which will be discussed at next month's planning commission meeting in terms of what that will look like and when it will occur and who will be staffing that meeting. In addition to everything already mentioned, we are expecting to provide both live and recorded webinars. And we are currently in the process of creating a website solely dedicated to the topic of the housing element update. Now, for those of you who may recall me talking about the housing element in previous presentations, I do want to remind everyone that our housing element update effort also includes the creation of a new social justice element, and it does include an update to our safety element to ensure that all three elements, which again are chapters of our general plan, are consistent amongst each other. Next slide, please. So as I already mentioned, on November 16th, staff will be going to this planning commission to discuss the topic of creating a housing element subcommittee to find ways to further educate the public and gather additional public input as it relates to our housing element update. And then starting in mid-November, we will be having a huge housing element kickoff, which will include various meetings and public outreach efforts. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation for tonight. Tonight's item was an informational item and therefore no action is required. However, this is an opportunity for the City Council to ask any questions they may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to open it up to public comment first. I see no hands from public comment. I'm going to close public comment, entertain any questions or comments from the council. And I see Councilmember Wiley's hand up. Councilmember Wiley.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And I think housing is key to everything that we are doing. And, when you look at those numbers, it's going to be an uphill climb to try to meet those needs. Because if you look at, for the ongoing one, not the current one, but the next one, if you look at the low and the very low, that's about 1,100 units. And that's the same as our above moderate. And so if you think that if we would build equal numbers of low and very low and moderate, I mean, that would be a huge change for Vacaville, because currently, almost everything we're doing is in the above moderate category. And the other thing that, makes such a difference is the things that are being built now and we're seeing go up around town, were approved years ago by the council. So the things that we are doing, don't come to fruition until several years down the line. So I'm really glad we are looking at this now and trying to find ways to meet those needs. I do have one question on slide 10 of 14, where you were showing the income. So are those numbers, the household income, all of those are for a family of 4? Is that correct?
That is correct.
And on the next slide, slide 11, where you talk about focusing on low wage jobs, what exactly is the definition of a low wage job? Or is there a dollar amount for a low wage job, or what is that?
I could be mistaken, so I just want to make sure I put that out there. But it's my understanding that a low wage job is a job that only affords a family of 4 to reside in housing that's affordable to very low or low income households or housing units.
All right. And do we have any kind of idea how many of the jobs in Vacaville are currently would be considered low wage jobs?
We currently not, however, is part of the scope of work for the preparation element, and that is something that we will be analyzing and we will eventually have the answer to.
All right, thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. Excited to be sort of embarking on this process, and I'm looking forward to all of the discussion that we have coming up on this item. For me, missing middle housing is the main event. That's what we need to focus on. It's getting those folks that work here the ability to also live here. Second on that item, and this is sort of a general comment, I think that they're unrelated, but it's caused pretty tremendous issues in the city of Vacaville over the past probably 20 years. I'm not sure if there's any way to also factor in things outside of just affordability, like livability, right? So do they have a school? Do they have a park? Do they have a community center they can walk to? Are there living wage jobs within a, preferably walking or biking distance, if not, at least not having them have to get on the freeway and commute? And I know this traditionally isn't included in this process, and this will be included sort of in the housing element, but I would like to place a little more emphasis also on livability. We continue to build housing tracts in Vacaville, just seas of homes with no really amenities for kids or families. And I think we need to change that and codify that and really kind of make that the new standard. So however that can be sort of incorporated or flavored into the next steps in the process, I think livability as much as affordability is vitally important. And we need to look at all of the different things that go into a neighborhood in addition to actually getting houses that Vacaville residents can afford to buy. So really appreciate all your work. Looking forward to the future conversations, but just hoping that that can be sort of in the back of staff's mind as we move forward on this process. Great presentation. Thank you for everything, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, we'll move to
Thank
9C, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is the annual report on the Opportunity House operations from the folks at Vacaville Solano Services Corporation. Colleen Haruman, their executive director, is here to make a presentation to the council.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and good evening, Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, City Council members, and community members for being on this evening. I'm really excited about presenting this report. You're going to see that we have done a lot of things and a lot of growth. If I could have the next slide, please. We've expanded our programming dramatically from just Opportunity House, as you can see. I'll explain what these different icons are. Youth Rising is a program that we partnered with the Vacaville Unified School District, and we provided a summer program for disadvantaged youth and those at-risk youth, and it was a huge success. The Vacaville Warming Shelter, that was our partnership with the city of Vacaville. Again, another success, and you'll see in a further slide more of a breakdown on how that success truly was. We have a children's health and wellness program now that's within Opportunity House, where we're focusing on the children. That hasn't been done before. They've kind of been along for the ride. So now they have their own case manager as well as programming. And again, I will go into more detail on that as well. And then last but not least is My Friend's House. We've talked about it before. It's our homeless youth shelter for transitional age youth, which are 18 to 24. If I could have the next slide, please. So this year at VSSC, we have helped a lot of people, a lot of community members out there, 478 individuals, the sheltered bed nights, that a lot of that has to do with the warming shelter to reach that almost 12,000 number. And then the amount of meals, which continually blows me away to think that we can serve that many meals in 1 year's time. Next slide, please. Our services have included housing 91 individuals. That number is a little bit lower than what we would do normally, and that's due to COVID. People are staying a little bit longer, which we are completely fine with, because the longer they stay, the higher our success rate with those individuals. And just so you can see the difference, 62 adults and 29 children in the last year. Currently tonight, we are housing 38 individuals, and 20 of those are adults and 18 are children, and that's as of tonight. The 26,000, almost 700 meals here, and then almost 9,000 shelter bed nights here just at Opportunity House. The other thing I want you to take note of is that graph. You can see how it breaks down on the individuals. Of course, we're seeing a lot of single women. That has always been our mission, is women and single parent mothers. But you can see that our numbers on single men has actually bumped up a little bit higher than single mothers, in fact. And then we have single fathers down there, as well as the couples with children, which we only had one. We normally just see individuals on that. So if I could have the next slide, please. This is a little bit about our Children's Health and Wellness Program. So far, we've helped 14 children, and that was just in that the July 1st to June 30th timeframe. As I said today, we have 18 children. So all those children currently are being served as well. We're using some evidence-based curriculum, using the zones of regulation, and we're having a great success with this. And I really want a special shout out to Kaiser for stepping up and sponsoring our program. If I could have the next slide, please. Our warming shelter, I think this is, it warms my heart, no pun intended. We were able to house 262 individuals, or not house, give them a warm place to sleep. And if you just look at how Sunday was with all the rain and everything, where did those individuals go? That racked me all day long, thinking of the individuals out there, because opening that warming shelter proved that we've got people that we can help. And seeing that we had 44 positive outcomes at the close of it is just amazing. In fact, one of my case managers was looking at this report and it brought tears to her eyes. These are chronically homeless people that we were able to place in transitional housing or put them in substance abuse, get them stabilized on medications, which is humongous. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems out there, is getting people stabilized on their meds. And then reunited with family. So, and connecting them with the services that are out there through the county. So great success. I'm hoping that we can partner together and do something again. I definitely do not think we need to start in November. It's something that we need to talk about and then possibly plan for January and through March of next year. So anyways, it was a great success, and I thank you for that partnership. Next slide, please. Our Youth Rising outreach. We used to call it My Friend's House Homeless Youth Outreach, and we've changed it. We love the Youth Rising outreach. It sounds more appropriate. The kids that we're helping love this, and this is for at-risk youth of homelessness. We're working with a lot of the McKinney-Vento children, which is a homeless definition that the Vacaville Unified School District uses. We've got kids that are couch surfing and all that. We're really trying to help them. This is a HEAP funded outreach program. So we are getting lots of grants for all our different programs that we're doing. We started with the horse therapy program, and this actually was wonderful working with LNU Lightning Complex fire survivors. There were lots of kids, and so we want to take care of the families, and the parents are dealing with so much, but we have to understand how much the kids are dealing with too. The horse therapy work, and that was also something that was funded by the Solano Community Foundation. And then, as I said, the summer camp program, 81 incoming freshmen and sophomores throughout all of Vacaville Unified School District. Huge success. We had many kids that came back week after week and just loved it. And in fact, just last week, we did a movie night to gather them again because they want to stay connected with us. So we're making great strides in helping our at-risk youth out there. Next slide, please. My Friend's House Shelter, we're coming soon. We received a grant for $550,000 from Solano County. It will keep us funded for 3 years. This shelter is for the TAY population, as I said, transitional age youth, those coming out of foster care. So it's from ages 18 to 24. They'll be getting case management, mental health treatment, all that. You can see that we're going to work with education, work on financial understanding of finances and budgeting, all those types of things. This is a housing first shelter, which means it's a low barrier, but with this age group, we don't feel that there's going to be a problem with heavy or long-term substance abuse. So this is going to be a perfect way for us to handle this. And so that you know too, doing this for 3 years with this population, our goal is to also get licensing so that we can open a true youth shelter, which would be for ages 12 to 17. But that's down the road, and we'll talk about that at another time. And then next slide. And that's the end of my presentation, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to open it up to public comment. I see no public comment tonight. I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to the council for any questions or entertain a motion. I see Vice Mayor Sullivan. Go ahead.
I don't have any questions, Colleen. I just wanted to say thank you and your staff at VSSC. You guys are absolutely fantastic and literally are doing just the most amazing job in the city of Vacaville. So just huge kudos to you and your team and all of your participants. The program growth you guys have experienced over the last couple of years has been phenomenal. The city is always relying on you to provide the services that we really need to get out there. So I just couldn't be more grateful to have you and your team. And I just wanted to say kudos and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll go to Councilmember Wiley.
Thank you very much for your work and for the presentation. And I came by about probably 2 months ago now and was able to see the program and see the children's, the whole thing that you're doing with the children's program. So I really appreciated being able to see that firsthand. I do have 2 questions. Looking at the data you presented on your 91 residents. So I noticed that there were 0 veterans. Is that, I mean, do you ever have veterans, or do veterans get services elsewhere so no one happens to be a veteran in your program?
We are happy to accept any veterans that we can. I will say there are lots of services in Solano County for veterans. As you know, the Rocky Hill apartments are for veterans. So they tend to get a lot of services. I think in the 4 years that I've been here, we've had 2 veterans in, but as soon as they're here, we're able to get them housed because there are a lot of veteran housing out there.
All right. And then I have done a couple of police ride-alongs since I've been on council. And we've seen several homeless people out and in search of a place. And sometimes they're older people as well. And so I saw that you also serve 0 people over 62. So is there no older people are coming to you? Because I know that there are some older people that are out there.
Right. That's another, we don't have any problem. Like right now I have, I actually do have a 64-year-old and then I have a 59-year-old. So we don't have any restrictions on age any way, shape, or form. We're just not seeing them come here. But again, there are services out there. Once they hit that senior age, they can get a lot more services than they can under that 55 age. So that's why we tend to see a lot of the younger.
All right. And then also it was on the chart that was on in the book, the extended report. So there was the income range at entry and the income range on exit. So is that a monthly income?
I'm trying to see that number for you.
It was like 2001 or 1500 to 2000.
Oh, I see. No, that's the amount they came in with monthly.
That their monthly amount.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And I will tell and I think I told you this, but I'll say that again. The cool thing about, even if they're not making very much money, that $1,500, because all their services are provided here, we have them, as they start out, save 90%. So the average person that leaves our program leaves with over $10,000 in their savings account to give them a real start and to give them, to truly break that cycle of homelessness.
Right. And are you still getting a great number of volunteers, or is there a need for volunteers?
With COVID, we are extremely strict here still. So we don't really have a need for volunteers here at the shelter. At the thrift stores, we're always looking for volunteers. We could absolutely use them there. But at the shelter, it's very limited. It really is. I will say, I'll throw it out there. We are looking for people that would like to help with the Children's Health and Wellness Program. We're looking for volunteers to assist our director.
All right. And like you, I was really worried Sunday about who was out there in the rain. And so I do appreciate the help we were able to give the people last year at the warming shelter as well. So thank you very much for the report and your work.
You're so welcome.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Hi, Colleen. I just wanted to just kind of echo some of the comments by Vice Mayor Sullivan. I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. I feel like sometimes you guys don't hear thank you and appreciations from the community enough. Reading this, and I'm new to the council, but living in other parts of California, I saw the huge sheer magnitude of homelessness, and what you guys are doing in Vacaville is amazing. Help people, and I just really appreciate what you're doing. Looking at the emphasis where you're really happy about aligning people with medication, that's really important. The mental health aspect of being on the streets is really tough. And I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. I look forward to assisting you guys in the future.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Sullivan.
Colleen, two clarifying questions, and I should have asked these earlier. I apologize. So there is sort of a common, I guess, misconception, but I know it's kind of partially true that generally men can't stay at Opportunity House. Can you talk about that a little bit, or how that works or how that doesn't work?
Well, as I showed on the graph earlier, we do take men. We take single men, and we take single fathers. So you don't. We take men. There's no problem. In fact, we've seen huge success with the men that are here right now. I'm just so proud right now. I have a single dad with 3 children, ages 2 to 12, and he's doing it, and it's amazing because he doesn't have a car, and he's going around, going around with his kids, walking them to school, walking them to daycare, and then being here full time with his youngest daughter. So, men. There's just such a stigmatism against single men as far as fathers, and they're amazing, just like the single moms are. They're amazing, and they need help just like everyone else. But we help everybody. There is no age group, no gender, and that's an important part too for me to say. There's no gender barriers here. Everyone is welcome at Opportunity House.
I guess, thank you. And where I'm kind of getting at, I guess, I really do kind of hold you as probably one of, if not the expert on homelessness in Vacaville. And so our point in time count puts us somewhere around 90. Our police department estimates it's maybe somewhere around 80 to 90 homeless in Vacaville. Where are the gaps? So we're going to talk about ARP requests tonight. If you had a magic wand, or, where are the holes in our homeless system? Where are the gaps in the services that you provide? What are we missing, I guess, in the spectrum? And so, I know there's often talk in the Homeless Roundtable about single men. Not totally sure where that came from, but, what are you seeing as missing in Vacaville? And through something like the ARP, the city could maybe fill some holes.
Well, we definitely do need a men's specific shelter. And we need a magic wand. You said it. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it. I would love to have a navigation center, a place where we can provide these services like we did at the warming shelter, that's on an everyday basis, that can easily be turned into a cooling shelter or a warming shelter at a drop, a hat drop. Like for Sunday, if we had a navigation center, it would have been like, I would have said, all hands on deck. It's open today, and we're bringing people in to get them off the streets. It's just the right thing to do to care for our community members. And that's, I feel, is our biggest gap. The biggest gap of not being able to provide services in a manner every single day. And I know people don't want to think that we need that here in Vacaville, but we do. And as I've said lots of times, we are lucky in Vacaville that we only have 80 to 90 to 100 homeless. We are lucky that is a community that is easily taken care of. And what we saw doing that warming shelter proves that there are people that want to get off the streets, but they want to stay here in Vacaville in one shape or another because this is their home. And so that's why they're staying here. And if they can't get into Opportunity House because maybe Opportunity House isn't right for them, maybe they're not ready to get off drugs, but that doesn't mean if we had another shelter or a navigation center that they still could get case management and stuff, they wouldn't be ready down the road.
So that is fantastic. So a front door is kind of what you're saying. So one of the other common concerns I hear out there, and I think there is some validity to it a little bit, is if you build it, they will come kind of thing, right? So if we had some sort of navigation center, is there a way to keep it just to Vacaville residents only, or would it just draw people from all over the place? Could you handle that? If how would you address the serving Vacaville only question?
Well, I think and that's a good question, and I thank you for asking it. We hit that roadblock, that problem with the warming shelter. But what we found as we were moving forward with it, that it is something that we can say, are you a Vacaville resident? Of course, everyone's going to say they're a Vacaville resident. Well, that's what happened when we had the warming shelter. But the thing is the more that we have relationships with them, we truly do find out who is and who isn't. And then as we did with the warming shelter, many people were taken, like there were Fairfield residents that were taken back to Fairfield. And that's just one example. But yes, there is a way for us to be able to focus on Vacaville residents because that's what we want to do. We want to take care of our own. I also feel a navigation center that provides services is not the draw that a warming shelter is. A warming shelter is a draw when there's nothing else out there in our county they're going to come to. Everybody's going to come. In fact, the hospitals were sending people to us. We had to school this hospital that you cannot send people to us. We had outside police departments trying to bring people to us, and we had to turn them back to their cities. A navigation center would be different. I'm sorry, but a navigation center is different because it's a daily thing. It's not just this, oh, come here and get food and sleep.
That's a great answer. Thank you. My last question, and I'll turn it over back to the council. So do you take referrals from the police department now, or work with the police department? And would there be, I guess, if we move forward on any of these ideas in the future, could you collaborate or partner or have them even kind of gatekeep or refer for services? What is your relationship with Vacaville PD now, and do they provide referrals for you guys to provide service or collaborate? How does that currently work?
I am so glad you asked that because that was missing from my presentation. And I know right now, Kelsey, my assistant, is going, oops, I forgot that. Yes, we partner. We have a contract with the City of Vacaville Police Department, and we partner with the crew, the Community Response Unit team. And we have 3 case managers that go out with them at like 4 o'clock in the morning and Monday through Friday. So we do have a partnership with them. We work with Sergeant Katie Cardona very closely and her whole team. And yes, we work with referrals. Even now, we get referrals to Opportunity House for those that are going to fit the program. So yes, we have a very close relationship with Vacaville Police Department.
Thank you so much, Ms. Berman. That's all my questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Colleen. Excellent questions and comments from my colleagues. I agree, you're doing a fantastic job in a very difficult subject. That there's a lot of roads that lead to homelessness, a lot of folks that really need some help. I'm definitely interested in following up with you about what a navigation center would look like in Vacaville, and making sure that, we're setting something up to be successful for the people that could be there, to get them that case management that you talked about, as well as, just ensuring the public that there's nothing to be scared of with some of these things if they're done correctly. The last thing that I wanted to bring up is the fact that not only are you guys doing a great job, but I'm really proud of the fact that our community continually comes together and helps with the Opportunity House as well. And I know that there are some upcoming opportunities for the public to help with Opportunity House, Colleen, with like Festival of the Trees and some of the other stuff. I would love to give you an opportunity to tell the public about how they might be able to help by either attending that event or in other ways to provide the services that you and your team do so well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That was the other thing we realized when Debbie was giving her presentation. We didn't put our fundraising options up there. Yes, we are actually going into Festival of Trees. That's going to be, the gala is going to be November 29th. It's a Monday after Thanksgiving. Tickets are available if you go to our Facebook page, Vacaville Festival of Trees. We also are going to have our Festival of Trees virtual again this year, as we did last year. We're collaborating with businesses all over Vacaville, and you'll be able to go look at the trees and bid on them and bring one home or have it delivered to you. We also have our ongoing Cookies for a Cause, which was a fundraiser I started last year due to COVID, never realizing that to date we've raised over $35,000 selling cookies. So thank you everybody out there. You can always order your cookies from us. And then we just had a highly successful Cocktails for a Cause event. We raised over $16,000 and came up with a Bartender of the Year. It's Jeet at Clay Oven. And then our celebrity golf tournament, that's in June. That will be happening again this year. And we partner with Desmond Bishop. And it's again, that was another hugely successful fundraiser for us. And we're looking forward to next year. Other than that, we're always looking for monthly donors. You know, $5 is not too little. If that's all you can afford, I have many seniors that send us a $10 or $15 check every month, and every single penny counts. Even if it's just an occasional gift card drop off, or we get people in the churches. I mean, I just could go on and on naming the people that have supported us by giving us food, by giving us clothing. Christmas is coming, that taking care of our families. It just blows my mind and is what makes me so happy every day to come to work.
Well, keep up the good work, Colleen. We appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Sorry for asking a question again, but what you said, kind of following up what Councilman Stockton said, the fundraising. I guess you describing the father with the 3 kids, it really touched my heart. And like the fundraising, bringing the money in, like what can we do just go to actually help, like say that gentleman getting his kids to school? Just the fundraising funds from Festival of Trees, is that just for the whole program, or we want to really help him out, especially heading to the holidays, maybe help this dad get his kids to school easier? I mean, we donate money, like buy Uber. I mean, what can we do to literally just make an actual impact right now?
Well, I will say by participating in any of our fundraisers, the money comes here and it helps us to provide the services. Your suggestion of an Uber would be fantastic. He's not in a situation right now where he could drive even if he had a car. And he's working towards that. He's working on improving his life right now. At Christmas time, you can, or even now if you want, anyone can call our shelter at 447-1988 and say that they would like to adopt a family. And for Christmas, we start that up as soon as we get the inquiries. And so, Mr. Ritchie, if you're interested, you can always give me a call and I can get that connected for you. I can hear you're passionate about that. But anyone can do that. If any individual would like to do something where they're helping a family, you can absolutely just give me a call, as I said, and I will help you get connected with the staff members that are coordinating that.
That's great. I mean, even if you want to, I mean, please, if you can map out his path for each of the schools, find out what the distance, because you can do that on Uber and give you the estimated fare cost. I mean, literally find out what it would take, and I would love to connect with you.
Okay. All right. That sounds great.
Councilmember Silva.
All right, thank you, Colleen, for the great presentation and all the great work your team and residents are doing. Also, just want to appreciate the commercial kitchen component or aspect that you also help provide local community for. So I'm going to go ahead and motion to accept the annual report.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Sullivan,
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton,
Yes.
Councilmember Ritchie,
Yes.
Councilmember Silva,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley,
Yes.
Mayor Rowlett.
Aye. And I just want to say, Colleen, thank you for all you do, and your board is amazing. Thank you again for the presentation. We'll move on to the next item, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This next item is a report on the City of Vacaville's property management plan for surplus city-owned property. Emily Cantu, our Director of Housing and Community Services, will provide you with the presentation on this item.
Thank you very much. This is Emily Cantu, the Housing and Community Services Director. Good evening, Mayor, and Vice Mayor, and City Council members. Next slide, Crystal. Tonight, we are asking the City Council to receive a report on the City of Vacaville Property Management Plan, provide direction on potential properties that could be declared surplus or exempt surplus properties at a future City Council meeting, and to provide direction on the proposed process to dispose of surplus property after the requirements of the Surplus Land Act are met. Next slide. So as background, there are three primary legislative requirements that drive the creation of a City of Vacaville property management plan. First, every year on or before December 31st, the city must prepare an inventory of all of its real property and determine which property is in excess of its foreseeable needs. That inventory must be provided to any person who requests a copy. Second, no later than April 1st each year, the city must provide an annual progress report on the general plan to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. And that's the report that Tyra was talking about a couple items earlier this evening. Starting in April of this year, that APR must include city land in its surplus land inventory. The State Department of General Services is going to include those properties in a statewide inventory, and that APR must include any surplus properties that were disposed of. Next slide. The third legislative requirement that drives the creation of the property management plan is the Surplus Land Act, SLA. The SLA was modified effective January 1 of 2020, and then further modified by additional legislation during the 2020 year. The SLA requires that before the city can negotiate for the disposition of city property, they must meet the requirements of the SLA. And by disposition, that means the sale or lease of greater than 5 years. The SLA, the purpose of it was to connect developers who are interested in building more affordable homes to surplus local public land. The City Council can declare through a formal action land owned by the city as not necessary for the city's use as defined in the SLA. There's also the opportunity to determine land to be exempt surplus land if it meets specific criteria. So once declared surplus, the SLA requires certain noticing and negotiating with a preferred entity if they express interest in developing affordable housing, parks, or school development. So page 3 through 5 of attachment 1 to the staff report, which is the property management plan, provides additional detail regarding the SLA requirements. Next slide. So in addition to the legislative requirements, the City Council has expressed interest in receiving a report of all the real property that is owned by the city. So based on all of those factors, staff have prepared a comprehensive document to include all real property owned by the city and properties that may be declared surplus land or exempt surplus land for your consideration. And then just to note that the format and the content of this plan is modeled after the property management plan that was required to be prepared and was submitted to the state to inventory former redevelopment agency property pursuant to state law. Next slide, please. The inventory of city-owned real property is now complete and contained in the property management plan. I'll call it plan from now forward. The plan lists and describes all city-owned property as of today's date. Examples of city-owned land that may or may not be accessible to the public includes parks, bike paths, roads, creeks, wells. Land owned can include, but it's not limited to, remnant land after capital improvement projects are done, or land that might be dedicated to the city by private developers. The plan provides a summary of the property and the current governmental use of the properties. And again, identifies properties the city council can consider if they'd like to declare it surplus. Finally, the plan is going to aid the city in meeting the requirements, the legislative requirements of the annual reporting that must be done each year. And it's the intent that this plan can be reviewed and updated on an annual basis. Next slide. So in summary, the city owns 572 properties throughout the city and unincorporated area of Solano County. 482 properties are listed in Appendix A of the plan and are currently improved, used, or will be used for city purposes. These properties are grouped into 19 categories that are listed on page 3 of the staff report. 7 properties are listed in Appendix B of the plan. They're categorized as improved, facilities leased. These properties are not being considered this evening, but will be presented to City Council for discussion at a future meeting. 61 properties are listed in Appendix C of the plan and are categorized as housing properties. These properties are included in the City Council approved housing disposition and development strategy being implemented, or were acquired with community development block grant funds with certain restrictions regarding their use. The remaining 22 properties will be discussed in detail in a moment. But first, we want to take a few moments and Crystal will pull up a map that has been created with all 572 properties. So here you're looking at the overall map of all of the 572 city-owned parcels. Each category, there's 24 total categories, are color-coded. You can see them on the left. So there's improved, open space, the housing property, the surplus that we'll be talking about in a moment. On this map, you can select a particular category, such as improved park. And you select that on the right, and it will show you all the park in a moment. There you go, park. Let's see, there's 63 park properties. Crystal, you want to try open space for another example? There's our open space properties, 103. How about the improved facilities? So our community centers and our wastewater treatment facility. And there's some wells in town. There's 12 wells. Little tiny, you can zoom in. And there's 61 housing properties, just for one final example. Thank you, Crystal. We'll go back to the presentation slides now, but please let us know if at any time you would like to take a look at that map again. Sorry, Crystal's doing that. For purposes of the plan, again, there are 22 properties have been identified for consideration by the city council whether to declare as surplus property or exempt surplus property under the SLA because they are not being used for or planned to be used for a governmental purpose. We've grouped these 22 properties into 3 categories for your consideration. There's surplus property disposed, no plans for future use. There's 16 of those properties. 4 properties, surplus property disposed, planned for future use to be built by a developer. And then 2 properties, exempt surplus, disposed, no plans for future use. Next slide. So just to note, when you're thinking about whether to declare a property surplus land or not, you will want to consider whether the property is no longer needed for the city's use. When that formal action is taken at a future council meeting, a couple findings will need to be made that the property is not performing a valuable public function and that the property does not provide tangible or intangible returns to the city. Next slide. So for the 22 properties we're going to review in a moment, staff looked at the current and foreseeable public uses and determined that the property is not currently performing a valuable public function. So again, this evening, the council can determine if one or more of these proposed properties should be declared surplus or not. After a property is declared surplus, the property must comply with the SLA process before it can be sold or leased. Again, including noticing, potentially negotiating with a preferred entity, and finally, the disposition needs to be reviewed by HCD. Again, page 3 to 5 will give you additional detail on the SLA requirements. Next slide. So the first 16 properties are categorized as surplus properties, disposed, no plans for future use. If the council determines to declare one or more of these properties as surplus, it is recommended that they be sold for no less than fair market value to the highest bidder through a request for bids process. At the completion of that process, a purchase agreement with the highest bidder would be presented for consideration by the city council. And that would require your approval to move forward with that sale. The property would then be developed by the buyer in accordance with applicable zoning and building regulations, any other required federal, state, or local processes that apply, with no further city input or oversight. So the next slides are going to be the properties. Next slide, please. So the first one is the Pleasance Valley Road remnant. It's located on Pleasance Valley Road in the unincorporated areas of Solano County. It's a little bit more than 20 acres in size. It was purchased for the Iroquois Basin. And outside of the need to reserve a drainage easement at the southeast corner of the parcel, there are no current or foreseeable governmental uses for the property at this time. Next slide. The second property includes 2 parcels. It's almost 1.5 acres. This was purchased for a future fire station, but is no longer needed for that purpose. Next slide. The California Drive remnant, there's a very small property at less than 1/2 acre. And that is a remnant property on California Drive. And it's a remnant based on bike path development, and it was left over from that project. Next slide. Quinn Road remnant, another remnant parcel remaining. This one's remaining from the Leisure Town Road I-80 project. It's located on Quinn Road. Just a note, staff have received some interest from a neighboring owner regarding this property. Next slide, please. Wilson Street property is a former redevelopment property that was transferred to the city. It's on Wilson Street in downtown. It is a very small lot, which also requires sidewalk improvements on the north side of the property. Next slide. Nut Tree Ranch Airport site, there are 3 parcels located adjacent to the Nut Tree Airport. These are also former redevelopment agency properties transferred to the city. Together, these parcels are pretty large, almost 39 acres. Next slide. 2 parcels on Birch Street, total less than a half acre. These were dedicated to the city as public park, but are not currently being used by the city as park space. They are, long, narrow shaped parcels. Next slide. 3 parcels currently zoned as open space, total 1.65 acres. And these are remaining from the development of the Allison Drive I-80 overpass project. These parcels are currently landlocked and there's no access. Next slide. Almost an acre remains from the Allison Parkway lift station project. The creek running through this parcel makes it pretty much undevelopable. And it's a little less than an acre. Next slide. The last parcel in this category for your consideration is a little over 2 acres and is a remainder from, again, the Leisure Town Road I-80 project. Next slide. Thank you. All right. The next category for your consideration is surplus properties disposed, planned for future use to be built by a developer. If the council determines to declare one or more of these properties as surplus, it's recommended that these properties be sold to a qualified developer that can be selected by working directly with a developer or leasee or by issuing a request for interest / proposal. The development and or use of the property would be documented in an agreement that would be presented to the city council for consideration and approval. The property would then be developed, like the other category, in accordance with all applicable zoning and building regulations, other required federal, state, and local processes that apply. But in this case, there would be city input oversight of the development to ensure that the commitments and obligations in any approved agreement are met. So the key difference between this category and the prior category is the oversight of the development and use by the city. Next slide, please. So the first is the Nut Tree Village, former stadium flag lot property. This includes 3 properties totaling almost 3.5 acres and was acquired for a possible hotel development. It's located at 50 Nut Tree Road near Lowe's and behind the Nut Tree Village. Staff have recently received interest from a developer in acquiring this property. Next slide. The Harbison Event Center, a 3.21 acre site behind the Nut Tree Village near Jelly Belly and along Nut Tree Road. This site includes the opportunity, or excuse me, that was the last presentation. The Harbison House, which is owned by the Vacaville Museum. And this property also has an easement for the Nut Tree train to move from the train garage to the amusement area. The site is currently used for some COVID testing, and the police department use it periodically for various trainings, and the Parks and Rec department oversee a master calendar to rent the property periodically as requested. Although serving a pretty limited governmental purpose at this time, staff have received interest from various parties regarding the purchase or lease of the site, and therefore we wanted to include this site for city council consideration, discussion, and direction. Next slide. The last 2 properties can be considered by the city council to be declared exempt surplus land because of the size or having no access and not being contiguous to open space or affordable housing if they are sold to an owner of contiguous land. So it's a limited category, but we did identify a couple that could fall into this category. If the council determines to declare these properties as exempt surplus, it's recommended that they be disposed of in the same manner as the first 16 properties. We took a look at the surplus disposed, no plans for future use, which means selling it to a highest bidder with no additional oversight above applicable zoning, building, federal, state, and local processes that are applicable. Next slide. So the first property is Marbella Lane property. It's a very small site on Marbella Lane that is left over from public right-of-way dedication. Next slide. The Allison Drive Monte Vista Remnant. This is located on the southwest corner of Allison Drive and East Monte Vista Avenue. It's near Hisui. And there's no access except through the private property. Next slide. So that is the end of my presentation with an overview of all of the city-owned properties, potential properties for the council to consider for surplus land or exempt surplus, and also an overview of recommended disposition processes. And I'm very happy, well, staff are here this evening and very happy to accept comments and accept direction and to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to open it up to the public. I see no hands from the, oh, I do see one hand from the public. Go ahead, Wendy Brecken.
Hi, this is Wendy Brecken. Oh, I see that I cannot talk as an individual. Never mind, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Elisa Minion.
Hi, Alicia Minion, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I just have a couple questions. So on the Pleasance Valley site where, you know, so if there's not, it's say that gets surplused and I don't know what it'll turn into, but I thought the intended acquisition at that site was to build a detention basin. So if the detention basin isn't built, is there an existing flood risk in that area? And then I have a question, and I'm sorry, I was driving in my car, and so I didn't get 100% of the presentation regarding the nut tree house that's behind Jelly Belly. Now, is that on the historical registry? Would that particular site, if you were to sell it to the interested party that you indicated, would that have to go through a different process? And then my last comment is, and I've said this before, you know, land is our most valuable asset. And I just think even if the land seemingly seems like a remnant or insignificant, I just hope that there are additional meetings to really carefully and thoughtfully consider all the information out there in order to ensure that the appropriate decision is made with regard to disposition of any city-owned land. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close public comment and have the staff answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, I can answer the question regarding the Harbison Event Center site and the existence of the Harbison House on that property. So there is a lease with the Vacaville Museum to have the Harbison House located on that site. So when you sell property, any leases in effect go along with the property to the new owner. So there would not be a different process based on the Harbison House being located there. And then I believe the utilities director, Curtis Paxton, is here and can respond to the question on flood risk without a detention basin located on the Pleasance Valley site.
Emily, and that's actually would be Public Works.
Oh, sorry about that.
Question?
Thank you. Public Works, can you please help out with that question?
Sure, Emily. This is Tim Burke, the Assistant Director of Public Works. The detention basin was constructed as designed, and the portion of the property in question, we only needed a small portion of the property, but the property owner at the time was unwilling to sell only a portion of the property, so we purchased the whole 20 acres, and we will retain a drainage easement over the portion that we still need as part of the detention basin, but the rest of it can be sold off. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Wiley, are you done?
Yes, I have a few questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. Seems like a lot of properties we're looking at, and there are just a couple that I had questions about. Like with all the things that are planned for Green Tree and the changes in the development up there, is there any, would there possibly be something for the Orange Drive property then? I know it was originally purchased for a fire station, which isn't the current plan now, but it might be something we would want to build on in the future or not. So is it close to the Green Tree development? And then my second question is on the Wilson property downtown. I noticed that it said that the funds that we would generate from the sale would need to go to low and moderate assessment fund. So would that mean that anyone who bought it would have to build low income housing there? It might not be even a big enough piece to do anything like that, but it was interesting to note that the money had to go specifically to low end housing asset fund. So I didn't know if that put requirements on anything that went on to that property if a person bought it. And then my last question, well, I have one, the Leisure Town Road area right there by the highway. You know, we've talked a lot about placemaking and making people aware of Vacaville, and is that something that we would have sort of a welcome to Vacaville area right there? Again, because if we make a decision tonight to, sell all these 16 properties and then later on say, oh, well, we could have used it for that. I just want to make sure that we're lumping all this together, that we're really thinking through possibilities for all of them. And like the one by the Harbison House, that seems like that might be a nice place for a park or being part of Centennial Park because of being at the event center of the Harbison House rather than just, selling it as surplus land. So those are kind of my thoughts when I look at all these properties lumped together.
Thank you, Councilmember Wiley, for all of your comments, which are exactly what we were looking for and hoping for this evening. These are things that staff can take into consideration. And, you don't have to make decisions on surplus property tonight. You can. Depends on, the majority of the council and what you would all like to do. But as staff, I'd say we're happy to go back and, dig further into the lands that you're considering tonight. And based on your feedback, look into whether they could be of use for the city's purposes in the future and not be sold as surplus land. And then to answer your specific question on the Wilson property, it would not be required that someone would need to build low-income housing. And you're right, it's a really small parcel. Because it was purchased with those funds, it just needs to be reimbursed. But there would be no requirement to build low-income housing.
Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Emily, for the presentation. And just one thing I would like to see maybe investigate a little further on is it's in the attachment as listed at number 8 in the presentation. It was that long sliver, I believe it was like 3 parcels north of Travis Credit Union. For that particular one, there was a study conducted under Fred Bruder's, well, it wasn't under him, but anyways, he helped organize this group from UC Davis to come out, check out the area. That entire area of that town, all the residents around there, they don't have a park or any type of open space to access by foot. And in that particular area, before I feel comfortable putting that particular parcel up for surplus process, I'd like to see if we can possibly use that to create a pretty innovative natural type park, where we kind of use the hillside landscape, as slides or steps, and then where both sides of that land is kind of interconnected over the particular creek, and just be something that's really serving and different and unique in our town as kind of this hidden little gem that our city has, while still connecting our residents through the different pathways, particularly the creek, throughout our town. So that's only the comments and recommendation I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Roberts.
Thank you for the presentation. I just had questions on one property that's in the presentation and one that actually was not included on there. Particularly the Nut Tree Ranch airport site. I understand it's a landlocked one. There's no infrastructure running out there. Both council member Sullivan and myself have brought up in the past a possible pump track BMX type park, and with proximity to that Centennial, or expanding Centennial out there, or even possibly maybe an outdoor amphitheater somewhere like what's in Wheatland, because it's away from residential, so there'd be no noise restrictions out in that area. So that's one I'd like to look further into for utilizing, for a park that may need a lot of space, like a BMX track. The other one I had a question on, which was brought up several council meetings ago, was the Mason Street, the old Greyhound bus station. If you had any update on that, because I thought we were going to be adding that to the surplus property as well. So if you have any answers to those, I'd appreciate it.
So yeah, again, I think I appreciate your comments on the Nut Tree Ranch / airport site, and we can definitely take a look at that and consider that. On the Mason Street Greyhound site, for the purpose of the plan today, it was still included in the leased properties to come back for future discussion. And I believe staff is working on some information regarding that site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. So I'm probably echoing some of the comments from my co-council members. First, Emily, excellent presentation. I know this was probably a ton of work and you had to dig up a ton of history and go back through the old record books to find all this. So this is really, really cool. And it gives us a lot to work with. It would be really helpful maybe if you could get council a list of the properties and indicate which have existing interest and maybe explain what that interest is. I know you mentioned on a couple of them there were developers interested or neighboring parties or et cetera, et cetera. That would be helpful in me making future decisions if you could flag that for us. Second, the Wilson Street property, and I think Councilmember Wiley spoke about this as well. We are looking at a great development plan there as we speak. I'm guessing you probably have already contacted the prospective developer, but I mean that would be a perfect addition to that plan, and I'm hoping and I'm guessing you probably already have made contact on that property, but we need to do that ASAP if you haven't. Coordination with schools. I know there's active discussions at the 3x3 with myself, Councilmember Silva, and Councilmember Stockton, as well as 3 school board members on how we get more schools in town, and so whether that's land swaps, land sales, partnering, et cetera, I wonder if any of these properties could be used as leverage to help us get some more schools or help kind of, swap property with the district to help them build a school or something there. So I'm not sure if maybe we can reach out to the school district to see if there's any opportunity for us to enhance their ability to build some more schools or make it easier. It would also be helpful, Emily, when you send us a list, if you can send us a list of the existing interests, could you flag the districts that each property are in? I think to some degree, for example, in my district, there's a certain group that really wants a dog park. And so it'd be nice to know which of these little slivers are in my district, because maybe that would make a great dog park, because it wouldn't make, at 0.3 acres, it wouldn't make a great anything else. So knowing by district would be helpful. I guess after hearing the presentation, I'm just super grateful by all the work staff have done. I'm not really interested in moving anything tonight. I think it gives myself at least a lot to think about. And if there is anything urgent that you need us to move on, I'd appreciate a heads up. But I just a lot of information, a lot of crazy ideas and good ideas going through my head. And then the last thing, I do really like the idea of anywhere we can kind of expand existing parks and recreation facilities. Councilmember Wiley and Councilmember Roberts both talked about expanding Centennial Park, a pump track, walking trail, something like that would be fantastic. And the Harbison property is such a gem. I wonder if it could be a moneymaker for the city. Could we get into the event management business? I know places in Napa or Sonoma have really nice high-end kind of, city-owned and county-owned parks and event venues. It's just such an underutilized resource. Is there any ability for the city to activate that property and really make some revenue for the city and kind of use that as something that we can kind of show off, like kind of like Ulatis Community Center, et cetera, et cetera. Is there the ability to activate that, I guess, is my question, or staff could look at that. Anyways, those are my questions and those are my feedback. Thank you again. I know it was a ton of information. I really appreciate the time tonight.
All right, Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. A couple of these properties kind of seem like, kind of like no-brainers as far as like, or really minimal. They're so small and inaccessible that they seem like it would be okay, such as the California Drive, Quinn Road. I think that's was an SID for SID or something before, and then the one that was over by the creek over on Allison, like some of those seem kind of like no-brainers. But I guess my question is even if we sold these, would we still have some say in what goes there? And what is the benefit of doing it this way as opposed to what we've traditionally done in closed session when we have people interested in purchasing these properties and they come to us with an idea of what they want to build there?
So thank you for your question about the process. It's a really good question. And so one thing that we do have to do, the city has to do, is meet the Surplus Land Act requirement. And that has certain noticing and certain entities that we have to notify that there's land available for sale. We have to negotiate for potential affordable housing, schools, or park development. But with the recommendations on how the properties would be disposed, those are recommendations from staff. There were two suggestions. One was basically what you're talking about, where we could work with a developer or a leasee. The council would approve the development or the use of a property. We would enter into an agreement and oversee the development and the use. So any of the properties that the council desires could be put into that category and disposed of in that manner after the Surplus Land Act process was met. The other suggested process is a highest bid process, which could be appropriate for some of these properties, again, at your discretion, where they would just be sold. Example could be those that you described, the little California Drive site, the small Quinn Road site.
Yeah, and Maribella's
property, yeah, Marabella, that type of thing. So that could be appropriate for those, but not for others. And so among the categories for how to dispose of the property, I'm happy for feedback on that as well. And we can move those around as you like.
Okay, and thank you for that. I am leaning towards, I mean, these are a lot of different properties in a lot of different areas. I'm sure that our constituents are going to have a lot to say about what is built in some of these areas. And I kind of like having each project come to us. I don't really like having all of these kind of thrown at us at once. That's just me personally, because we do get so much feedback on the different projects that go in the different areas, and I don't want to lose that control. So it'd be my preference that we give this some time before we just jump into, for all of these, making a decision tonight, so that way some of our constituents have an opportunity to reach out to us. I don't want to make a hasty decision, but I do appreciate the information. Like I said, there are some that seem, really no-brainers or simple to do, but there are some on there that I think really will shape the future of our community in these different districts and different areas. So I don't want to make any judgments on those today, especially without a plan.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll move to 9E, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, this next item is an informational presentation on the American Rescue Plan Act. Ken Manzanilla, our Director of Finance, has a presentation for you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. This evening, we'll be going over the eligible uses of the ARPA funds, potential funding opportunities identified by staff, and a plan to get community feedback on prioritizing the use of these funds. Next slide, please. Starting with some background on the ARPA funding, the funds are part of the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill that was signed by the President on March 11, 2021. $350 billion was allocated to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to respond to the COVID-19 emergency and bring back jobs. And of that amount allocated to governments, the city was allocated a little under $12.7 million. Unlike the CARES money we received that was allocated based on population, the ARPA allocation was based on other factors such as the extent of poverty, population, housing overcrowding, and age of housing in the city compared to other metropolitan cities. The funding is dispersed in 2 tranches. We received exactly half of the allocation in late June. We'll get the remaining half in June, July of 2022. Ineligible uses of the funds include deposits to pension funds, funding tax cuts, legal settlements, and deposits to reserves or rainy day funds. And then the funds must be committed by December 31st of 2024 and spent by December 31st of 2026. And then currently all agencies are working off interim compliance guidelines issued by the U.S. Treasury in May of 2021 and a series of FAQs while the Treasury works on finalizing the guidelines. Next slide, please. So eligible uses of the ARPA funds must fall in one of the 6 categories identified by the federal government, which I'll go over in the next 2 slides. So the first category is responding to the public health emergency. And this would include services and programs to contain and mitigate the spread of COVID, such as testing and PPE purchases, services to address behavioral healthcare needs worsened by the pandemic, such as mental health services, and payroll expenses for personnel dedicated to pandemic response. The next category is addressing the negative economic impacts from the pandemic, including household and small business assistance, aid to nonprofits, and workforce training and employment programs. And then funds can also be used to replace lost public sector revenue. The U.S. Treasury does have a really specific formula that must be used that compares the city's actual revenue growth from the last full fiscal year. So for us, that would be 2019. So prior to the pandemic, and then comparing that to an expected growth trend of 4.1% or the city's 3-year average revenue growth rate. And so the calculation can be done each December into 2023. And to the extent a city has revenue loss in this category, there is broad latitude to use ARPA funding for government services. This is the most flexible category of the 6, and through to December of 2020, the city's calculated loss was $200,000. So we will get 3 other opportunities to do this calculation as well. Next slide, please. So ARPA funding can also be used to provide premium pay for essential workers. The Treasury guidance does recommend that recipients prioritize premium pay for lower income workers, and the pay can be provided to internal and or external essential workers. The next category is investments in infrastructure, specifically in water, sewer, and broadband. Funding can be used for necessary improvements to sewer and water facilities, transmission, distribution, and storage systems, And then for investments in broadband, the focus is on households and businesses without access to broadband and those with connections that do not provide minimally acceptable speeds. And the final category is funding services to disproportionately impacted communities. Examples of eligible uses in this category are investments in affordable housing development, homeless services, and enhanced services for child welfare involved families and foster youth to promote a healthy childhood environment. Next slide, please. So in an effort to assist the council with prioritization of the ARPA funds, leading up to this evening's discussion, input was requested from all city departments on potential funding initiatives that fit the objectives of the ARPA funds and also align with the city's strategic plan goals. These initiatives total approximately $15.7 million and can be categorized in the following 4 priority areas: infrastructure, housing and homelessness, economic recovery, and city revenue loss and COVID expenses. And over the next several slides, I'll be briefly summarizing these potential initiatives. Next slide, please. So in terms of funding, the largest priority area identified at $6.1 million was infrastructure. This is due to strengthening the local economy being the city's highest strategic goal and also cost. So 2 areas identified by staff as potential sewer and water investment opportunities. Those are downtown specific plan and biomanufacturing project areas. Improvements in these areas are necessary to attract future businesses and ensure the success of the downtown specific plan. The total estimated project cost for these improvements needed in both areas is approximately $26 million, with an implementation timeline of 1 to 5 years, depending on the specific improvement. So to fit the ARPA spending timeframe, improvements with the implementation timeline of less than 3 years were recommended. The $6.1 million amount that you see on the slide would be for sewer improvements to the aging infrastructure for the downtown specific plan project, which will help facilitate new and expanded business investments in this part of the community. Next slide, please. So housing and homelessness is the second largest category at $5.3 million. Funding in this category would be used for affordable housing development to increase the supply of affordable and high quality living units, and funding for services to address homelessness. Potential funding opportunities include a $1 million contribution towards the operation of the regional homeless shelter and startup and eventual operation of a navigation day center located in Fairfield. The funding would include $250,000 annually for 3 years towards operation costs and $250,000 in one-time startup costs for the navigation day center. Next slide, please. So an $800,000 contribution towards the Navigation Day Center in Fairfield was also identified. So the funding would include a $240,000 a year for a 3-year period towards operation costs and a one-time $109,000 cost for a portable office building and shower and bathroom. And then the final item in the housing and homelessness category is investment in affordable housing development. So this would involve $3.5 million in ARPA funding set aside for potential public-private development projects that increase the supply of affordable housing available to low-income residents. Next slide, please. So the following category, economic recovery, has the largest number of proposals. Proposed strategies in this category range from direct household assistance to those with the greatest need to creating workforce development programs to lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. In addition to the proposals received from departments, including FIRST and FRC, the city also received requests for consideration from various nonprofits, including Visit Vacaville, the Chamber of Commerce, and the California Biomanufacturing Center. The proposals have been grouped into 3 subcategories. That's workforce development job training, direct aid to households, and aid to nonprofits and small business support. The first one being this workforce development job training. And so under the workforce development job training, the first item is a $750,000 contribution to California Biomanufacturing Center's Rapid Alternative Med Tech Pathway Program, or RAMP. Funding would be used to develop rapid training programs to transition participants who lost their job due to the pandemic to non-science jobs in the biotech industry. Next slide, please. And then the next item is for $410,000 and would involve partnering with an experienced nonprofit and our business on a 3-year workforce development program specifically targeted low-income residents. And then enhancing the city's current summer at City Hall intern program was also identified as a potential initiative. The proposed $300,000 funding request would allow the department to hire a part-time coordinator to supervise the summer at City Hall program for a 3-year period and enhance it by providing case management to the youth before and after the summer program. The program focuses on youth from low-income areas and provides participants with soft job skills and career development. And then the next item was covered in a presentation earlier by Ms. Egidio. So this item would be a $30,000 item for the Chamber of Commerce. It would be a contribution to the Innovation Summit and Entrepreneurs Expo, and that would be for a 3-year period, so $10,000 a year. Next slide, please. And then the last item under the Workforce Development Program was also covered in an earlier presentation. So this would be a contribution to the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce Educational Foundation for $7,500 for their scholarship program. And then under direct aid to households, the first item under this subcategory is to set aside $1 million to assist residents and small businesses impacted by the pandemic with delinquent city utility bills that aren't funded by the state's assistance programs. So one thing to note in this, under this category is that the state has recently created a water relief program for water providers like the city to receive state funding to address delinquent water bills. So there is the possibility that the city could tap into that funding to address a portion of the delinquent utility bills as well. The next proposed initiative is for $600,000 in ARPA funding for eviction prevention and housing stability services, including rental, utility, and food assistance, and to potentially fund the hiring of temporary staff to guide and assist our residents navigate the application process for the various state relief assistance programs currently available. Similar to the delinquent item that I just mentioned earlier, this initiative may be eligible for funding from an alternative funding source as well. And in this case, that would be the CDBG CARES funding. Next slide. The last subcategory under economic recovery is for aid to nonprofit and small business support. Council may recall back in June that $75,000 ARPA funding was already approved or was approved for the Downtown Vacaville Business Improvement District to restore lost revenue experienced by Downtown Vacaville due to the pandemic. So this item isn't included under this subcategory since it has already been funded. The new proposed initiatives under this category include an $88,000 contribution to the Vacaville Chamber to serve as the program administrator for the Shop Local Vacaville program. So this funding would cover a 3-year period. And the item after that is a $25,000 contribution to visit Vacaville for a lodging needs assessment study to assess the needs of Vacaville through the continued presence of the pandemic. And then the last item in this subcategory is $6,000 for the design and printing costs of an updated Starting Your Business in Vacaville guide. Next slide, please. The final priority area identified by staff is the city revenue loss and COVID expense category at $1 million. Funding in this category would go to restore lost revenue, pay for unreimbursed pandemic-related expenses, and support other city services. Examples of costs in this category include pandemic-related items such as on-site testing and reimbursement of unemployment and COVID-related leave expenses. And then to the extent that the city has revenue loss under the U.S. Treasury calculation, ARPA funding could be used for costs for general government services, even if they're not specifically related to COVID. And so these would include things such as cybersecurity initiatives or a citywide parks master plan strategy. Next slide, please. So staff has identified approximately $15.7 million in potential initiatives, roughly $3 million more in asks than the ARPA funding available. And to assist the city with prioritizing the ARPA funding and engage the community in the process, staff is recommending launching an online budgeting survey tool called Balancing Act. And reviewing the ARPA public participation processes at other agencies, online community needs surveys were used most extensively in addition to requesting public comment at a council board meeting. The Advantage Balancing Act has over a typical online survey as it gives residents a real-time view of the trade-offs public officials face when prioritizing funding. The survey would include the categories discussed this evening, plus any additional ones council would like to prioritize. And the survey would be available in English and Spanish and open from early to mid-November until mid-December. Advertising of the survey would be done through the city website, social and local media channels, and city hall and community centers. Additionally, we would encourage the council to promote the survey as well to reach the widest audience. And so we do have a demo of the survey available, which I'll go over quickly. Thanks, Crystal. And so for other agencies, the survey does allow an opening video. So for this particular agency, they had the mayor give an opening message. I've seen with other agencies where they actually use this video to almost provide a guide on how to complete the survey and how it works. So Crystal, if you can just click anywhere else, great, thanks. So for this particular agency, if we scroll a little bit further down on the page, we'll see that they had over 722,000 ARPA funding. And then the way that they have kind of preset the categories you see on the right under spending. And at the very top of the page, you'll see that they're in balance. So they received 722,000. This is the way that they have it allocated currently. Where the money goes on the left just shows that spending visually in the donut. And so I'm just going to go over a really quick example of how the survey would work. And so for a participant, if they were to click in the economic supports category, and they wanted to know more information on what exactly that entails, they can click on any of the information bubbles, those icons where it could point to a link elsewhere on the city website. Or if you click on that information bubble, it shows exactly what would qualify as an expense under this category. So if the resident, let's say they wanted to put more money towards small business grants and less money towards the support local and save, they would click on the reduction button under support local and save, as Crystal has done by reducing that by 5,000. You'll now see at the top that it shows that you have a surplus. So we have this $5,000 in extra ARPA funding that we need to allocate. And so in this case, if the resident wanted to put that to small business grants, they would click on that. You now see that we're back in balance. And if they wanted to provide any feedback as to why they did that, they can click on this red add a comment icon. That would be saved with their submission. And so they can put exactly kind of what their thoughts were on this particular move. And it's not included on this website, but what we would include on ours is a separate category that would be open. It would be an open category for suggestions and ideas. And so it wouldn't just be the preset categories. There would also be one that's kind of more open if a participant wanted to actually write in a priority and put funding towards that. And so, Crystal, if you can click on the submit icon now. And so here's another area where prior to submittal, there could be this prompt that's available. So as an example, with our survey, if you wanted to know sort of where our participants are what district they lived in as an example, this is a prompt that could come up and just another way for us to get information on kind of who's participating on the survey or any other information that we would like kind of prompted as part of this. Thanks, Crystal. You can go and close out of here. The next slide, please. So the next steps that would be involved in the process would be to create that online ARPA survey. We're shooting for creating that in early to mid-November, having that available until mid-December. And then we would then compile the survey results in that back half of December with a plan to update council in January with kind of where those survey results, how they came into play. And it would be in that meeting that where we would be looking for more direction from the council on exactly how we want to prioritize the funding. Kind of another thought with the January meeting is that by that time frame, we should also have the final compliance guidance from the Treasury. There's also the infrastructure bill that's out there with Congress, and hopefully by January, we will also have more clarity on exactly if that's going to pass and to what amount and what we would be eligible for. And then there's also that state water relief program I had mentioned that we had applied for that could potentially be used for delinquent bills. So we should have more clarity on these items by that January meeting. As far as reporting to council going forward, we would have ongoing updates as part of the quarterly budget presentations. And then similar to the CARES money, we would have to report to the U.S. Treasury on our uses. Next slide, please. So that does conclude the presentation. Although we're not requesting formal direction this evening, we would appreciate council's feedback and questions on the categories and the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to open up public comment. I have one hand up. Go ahead, Alicia.
Hi, Alicia Minion. Thank you for the presentation. And I'm really happy that there's going to be a survey so you can get more additional input. But I mean, in general, I'm definitely for utilizing funds for anything related to economic development, homeless, affordable housing. I don't know what that would look like with regard to affordable housing. I don't know if you would, basically give out additional vouchers. And then I do like the job training. There are a lot of jobs in the retail restaurant sector, and these jobs need to be filled. So I think this is a good opportunity for some training. And then, but I have some questions with, you mentioned premium pay, Ken, and I was wondering, would this premium pay be pensionable pay? Because I just, I think those employees that weren't able to telework and were really, were put in a position of, a situation where they would be routinely exposed to COVID. I mean, especially if they're underpaid as compared to their peers, I think, I think it'd be okay to use some of this money to compensate the employees, but I don't think one-time funds should be utilized in such a way where it turns out to be a pensionable item, which, as you know, would create future liabilities, for many, many years. So, if to the extent it becomes pensionable. So that I have a question on that. Is premium pay pensionable, similar to the premium pay some of the employees like police receive premium pay, and it is pensionable? And then lastly, the question about basically making the enterprise side whole, like with regard to delinquent water bills. I was just curious, how much more delinquent bills do you have than in a normal year? I'm sure not everybody 100% of the time is on time on their water bill. So I was just curious, what are the additional delinquencies during this COVID period as compared to prior years? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Those are great questions. So related to the premium pay, it's a great question. It's one that other kind of finance departments and HR departments have asked. And what we've seen is that they're typically given in the form of bonuses, and they have not been pensionable, kind of going that route. So I've seen that kind of as a strategy, I guess, if you want to call it that, where they're done as a bonus, which would not be pensionable. Related to the delinquencies, our balance currently, and this is kind of going off of, I think, last month, we were looking at delinquent bills between residential and businesses being over 1.2 million. I don't have the number compared to prior years, but I'd say one of the things that we're definitely seeing is that, especially on the business side, businesses that have never had issues with delinquent bills or payments, we're starting to see more delinquencies there. And so it's not an exact number, but we are definitely starting to see that, especially on the business side. But I can follow up with the numbers compared to prior years, but I don't have that this evening.
Thank you. Jerry Raycraft? Go ahead. Jerry, you're still muted.
How's that?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, and City and staff, my name is Jerry Raycraft. I'm on the board of Solano Napa Habitat for Humanity. And it goes without saying, we're, obviously supportive of any funding for affordable housing. I just want to bring it to the council's attention that we've been working with the housing staff for several years on a 9-parcel, 14-unit affordable housing project at Scoggins Court in East Monte Vista. One of the things Habitat for Humanity does very well is fundraise for construction of affordable housing. What we don't have much luck doing is fundraising for pre-development and site development costs. And we're at a point with this project that we're looking at somewhere around 100 to 150,000, which is relatively small number for 14 units of low-income housing that'll get the city, which will contribute to the city's RHNA obligation. But we're at a point where something as small as about 100 to 150,000 will get us through the entitlement stage and to a point where I personally am confident that we're going to be able to apply for and receive some of the state housing monies that are being allocated for not just housing, but support infrastructure costs and things like that. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Again, it's what I feel it kind of gets us over the hump, puts us in a position to apply for state housing funds and basically leverage a relatively small amount of the ARPA funds, somewhere 100 to 150,000, to obtain several $100,000 of what we hope would be state infrastructure grants to get this project. And again, it's 9 houses, and 5 of which would have accessory dwelling units. So it's 14 units of housing affordable to people at or less than 80% of area median income. So hopefully with that, just want to get in the door with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Brooke Fox next.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Just want to comment that I was very happy to see that, first of all, thank you again for your allocation of ARPA funds back in May, June. We're just about to launch our gift card program with some of those funds. And we've already stepped up our local advertising, which is having a trickle up effect to our advertising partners, helping them recover. So it started a really good chain. So thank you very much. And I do want to point out that I'm very glad to see downtown infrastructure on the docket for this. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the Arts Master Plan, which is something that the entire city needs, but downtown would greatly benefit from having an arts strategy and an arts master plan. So thank you very much and have a great night.
Thank you. I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the City Council. And I'll start with Councilmember Stockton. Go ahead, Stockton.
Thank you, Ken, for the great presentation. I know there's a lot of folks that can really use the help with the money that we're getting. I thought you broke it down really, really well. And I think that the best part is the plan that you have with that online survey. Question about the online survey. You said that there's the ability for the public to add something that maybe wasn't on the list. Will other people be able to see what is added to the list, or will only the person controlling the results of the survey see that?
I'll have to double check with the developer, but I believe it would only be us that receive the submission and would be able to see that. I'll double check on that.
Okay, just curious, because I mean, if we're getting a lot of the same suggestion, it might be a good idea to be able to add that so that other folks might be able to see that and consider it as well. But overall, really well thought out. I appreciate you taking the feedback from us and from the people that have reached out that could really use the help. So thank you for all the work you've done.
Vice Mayor Sullivan.
Thanks, Mayor. So a couple quick comments. Excellent presentation. I think, Ken, you guys did a really good job taking the council feedback and staff feedback and kind of consolidating it down. I was really impressed with the level of detail in the projects included. My first comment is, if at all possible, when we can, to tie items back to the strategic plan. So maybe even as you have the line items individually, kind of, correlate them or tie them back to that plan item. I do think to some degree, when you have, dozens of millions of dollars to spend, it's easy to have scope creep and start focusing on things that maybe aren't in the plan. So tying those back is great. I think also a way, to identify how it relates to COVID, right? So the focusing on the hardest hit residents, the hardest hit workers, staff, et cetera, sort of prioritizing the projects based on some sort of COVID impact scale. Again, the funding should be used to help those impacted hardest first, and then kind of, work away in that fashion. So I'd like to see that kind of in future iterations. I love the housing and homeless plan. It was very nice to hear from the gentleman from Habitat for Humanity. Councilmember Stockton and I have been working on some collaborative plans with Fairfield, Sassoon, Vallejo, Benicia, and the county for the last 6 months. And I'd love to check in with Emily or yourself to really dive through the line items for homelessness that you guys had on there tonight. Very appreciative, and I think those are great. I do have some questions on the survey, and maybe not questions, but maybe more feedback. So what you often see in community surveys is you'll release a community survey, a certain group will sort of get a hold of it, and then we'll encourage kind of their community to really kind of saturate responses in a certain fashion. And what happens is you get a sort of unbalanced or biased perspective. And we've seen this in some community surveys in Vacaville, and we're certainly seeing it in community surveys across the region with ARPA. And it gives one group, I guess, more leverage or more amplification than maybe they should have. What's really important in my mind with surveys is that you're getting a random sampling. So I love the tool. The tool is fantastic. It's a really neat tool. I'm wondering if there's any way to maybe also pay or have staff do a random sample. So the survey then would be maybe one community survey, but then one by invite only that really factors in age, gender, ethnicity, language, income, and location. Because otherwise what you get is you get sort of these lobbying groups that sort of lobby for special causes, and it doesn't really give you a true kind of vision of what the community needs. So I am a little leery of just sending out an open survey, even though the tool is amazing. I really think we need a good random sampling of the community that factors in all those demographics, because otherwise we're going to get a very one-sided survey back. And oftentimes folks that are low income, working multiple jobs, don't have access to internet, you know, they're the last ones to respond on surveys. And honestly, they were the hardest hit with COVID. So whatever comes back survey-wise, I would like to see a random sample option to really balance out that saturation aspect. But all in all, spectacular job. Very impressed. Looking forward to next steps. Thank you guys for all the hard work.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Councilmember Sullivan just touched on a lot of what I was going to bring up about the survey. It's a great idea. I think it's a good in between not having anything and doing the advisory committee for these different special projects like ARPA or Measure M. So I think if we can get the survey right, it could be a very, very useful tool. But same concerns that Nolan had, or same ones I had with my sampling experience in the past, either have the one at-large survey and then possibly kind of like what they've done for the different arts projects and the parks surveys, is maybe go set up in those different areas of town with iPads or laptops and let people fill them out on the spot to kind of look at those specific demographics that were hit harder than others. Because as he mentioned, that the people that are going to be filling out the online surveys have more access to internet or accessing the city webpage or more involved in the city politics and policies itself in the project. So any way we can find that can help reach more audiences than just purely an online survey would be very useful. More than that, I'm really impressed with the work done and the categories and how it's broken down. It looks like a very, very good start to how we can distribute that money that we will receive. Thank you.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Oh, thanks so much. I'll try to be brief because it's getting a little late, but I think actually Alicia Minion made a point in regards to kind of how we can highlight some of the money towards the workforce and getting people back into jobs. And I think it was like restaurants and retail industry. I want to use this opportunity to really kind of bring us out of the COVID kind of malaise we've been in and really aim higher than just getting them back to the position they were in a low wage that will put them in a cycle, not be able to afford the cost of living and homes and ability to buy workforce housing. We have a great opportunity to use the money that's been given to us to kind of reinvest back in the backbone of the community, the workforce. And I want to make sure that people, they might have came to this COVID situation in one line of work as a restaurant worker. Now they have a big reset. I want to make sure the backfill, we reallocate the money to allow them to maybe get trained and to take that position, and maybe in combination with Solano Community College, I want to dedicate a lot of money towards making sure someone used to be a restaurant busboy and now they work in a biotech industry. I want them to come out better than they went into this thing. So I really want to make sure that we allocate the money, not just get them back to work, get them back to a better job, to allow them to train and restart kind of their career in life. I want to use the opportunity to make sure everybody gets the ability to move upwards, not just back into the same position. I think Brooke Fox mentioned the art. I love art. I think it's very powerful for the city to have art. It shows that we're going forward. It's a great symbol of empowerment and going forward. But yeah, I guess the workforce is really strong to me. I think it's an opportunity for us to really move the pendulum upwards and make sure people are not going back to the business as usual, but they're doing better. So that's it.
Councilmember Wiley.
Thanks, Ken, for the presentation. I had just also a couple of questions on the survey. I like the fact that people can manipulate it and show what their priorities are and, you know, add or subtract from different categories. I am concerned about the question, are you a Vacaville resident? Because anyone can click on yes, whether they are or not. And so I do want to maybe look at how that response is categorized, or how we could make sure that we have people that are Vacaville residents answering, and that they can't answer multiple times. Because, you know, some of those things where you want your opinion known, you can do it multiple times during the day or every day that it's open, so that just one response per person, basically. And along those lines as well, I do feel like mid-November to mid-December is not the best time for people to be logging into this, because that's a very busy time of year for a lot of people. Things are going on that are taking attention other than how are we spending money. So I would see, can we perhaps extend it a little bit, or see if we need to bring it back in January, or I guess we'll just see what kind of response we get during that time. But it is going to be real important to get it out there to the community over and over in multiple ways. If you haven't done this, please do this. We welcome your comments and your thoughts and your suggestions. So I will just say I'm concerned about the time frame for that time. And we had our presentation earlier this evening from Opportunity House, and talked about, you know, homeless and, you know, people coming to the warming shelter that might not have been Vacaville residents. So I was just kind of surprised that we were giving money to a navigation center in Fairfield, but is it my understanding that there's also county money that's going to help with that? And so they wanted cities to be part of that central location, but that Vacaville would also have a navigation center as well. And then just give me an example or two of some non-science jobs in biotech, because you mentioned, you know, that specifically. So those were my comments, and if you could answer those, that'd be great.
Sure, I'll take the first couple of questions, and then for the last two related to the shelter, I'll ask for our housing director, and then for the RAMP program, our economic development services director. So for the first two questions related to if a person could participate multiple times. So we do have the ability to there's an IP log or something that we can download that would show the different IP addresses that have participated in the survey. So if somebody were to log in, you know, multiple times during the day, or you know, throughout the week, we would have that type of information that we could use. As far as the timing of the survey, we could monitor it, I guess, on a weekly basis. And if we aren't getting the amount of participation that would be meaningful, we definitely could extend the survey. It doesn't expire. That was just kind of initial time frame that we were proposing, just for feedback. But if council would like to extend that, that is something that we could definitely do. And then Emily, I'm not sure if you can respond to the regional housing shelter question.
Yeah, sure. This is Emily Cantu, the Housing and Community Services Director. The idea of discussing a potential contribution for shelter and navigation center in Fairfield is because homeless folks in Vacaville do utilize the services over there at the Fairfield shelter. And right now, Fairfield and Solano County and Vallejo have either committed funds, including ARPA funds, or are currently discussing committing funds. And if Vacaville wants to join in the regional collaborative effort and financing of that facility, this could be an opportunity to do so.
Councilmember Silva.
All right, thank you. Let's see. So I guess where I'll start this one is just a quick question, and then I'll have feedback after that. Are we able, do you think, I know we're still trying to work out the details, but do you think we're able to provide a loan in the event that the infrastructure bill that we anticipate coming out has funding that maybe can reimburse those loans if we're trying to push something a little bit more urgently? I know we're
So if I'm understanding correctly, I guess if the infrastructure bill funding became available, would we be able to kind of like pivot and use that money as opposed to the ARPA funding? Is that?
Well, yeah, or we can, or in other words, maybe use general fund or some other fund source to support a particular project that may be beneficial within the anticipated guidelines of these funds, and then and then those can be reimbursed. So, for example, on the last page of the attachment, where you list out attachment 2, staff proposed priority area list. So we're expecting 6 million, but there's 15.5 million proposal on there. So some of these, I think we're in the impression, or I'm at least in the impression that some of these may be covered or likely would be covered under the infrastructure bill. So if there's something in there, are we able to, maybe it's a small, more urgent project or something we just want to get taken care of? Is there a possibility that we can possibly, quote unquote, loan those funds and then those be compensated back with the infrastructure bill?
Yes. And so if council wanted to give direction on a particular item and to move that, or I guess just start on that immediately, we actually have received half of the tranche, so $6 million plus to do that. And so we have the funding. If we wanted to move on something right now, we don't have to wait for the ARPA funding to come in. We've received half of it, over $6 million of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So just a quick feedback on, and this is, yes, it's for staff, but it's also maybe more for council as well. So this Saturday, we had the first ever neighborhood cleanup. I know different events have been tried, throughout my upbringing here, but it was very magical, and I'll save a lot of my comments for later. But one of the things that became even more evident through all that, beyond the generosity of a lot of our staff, their families, and our general community members, is also still the need to build trust, right? And that's one of our priorities, and that's our 5th priority. How do we better engage our community and address these different equitable needs? The language in this particular, the intent with these particular grants is to, quote, bring back jobs, and with the target in underserved areas. I think one thing that was very evident, and I was, very happy, to play a small role in that overall effort, was being able to connect to certain households that maybe were very wary of these good-willed folks that were coming out at 7 o'clock in the morning to help them out in any way that they could. And not just that, but just even the tremendous amount of workup that was done just to connect and educate and make the folks there aware of what's going on. So for me, I think I think having a role or position that allows for that level position that allows for community engagement, that allows for that outreach, that allows for somebody who's local that can that already has some relationships built, but to continue to build those relationships and get professional development training on how to get into how to understand and how to relate to different folks, particularly within our growing Spanish-speaking population. I think that's gonna be something key that can really turn the tide within our city and be something that where we're able to have all these different programs that we're proposing, but the gap still remains to where we have these great programs, but still getting people to, number one, trust, to be willing to put themselves out there, to be able to tap into it. That still is a gap, no matter how many programs or projects we put in place. That ability to connect people is a challenge, and I think that slowly it can be achieved through building relationships. And I truly believe that having some professional development training funds that allows us to connect to folks from the community, while maybe even bringing in a staff member or two that's focused on community outreach, building those relationships, connecting businesses, particularly with those that are owners that are in a different state. I think that can I firmly do believe and have seen how that can be truly transformative for our city and our particular neighborhoods. I think for me, the real goal is to how we build what I'm calling the neighborhood wealth, right? So how do we build within these neighborhoods that have been underrepresented traditionally? How do we find ways to empower them to be sustainable and provide the training, whether it be through biotech or other means? Maybe the training is also through different skill sets. Maybe it's like Six Sigma, root cause analysis methods, to where we can get people certified and figure out how to identify root causes and improve processes. So certain certifications like that, I think would be very valuable and pay dividends, just as we've seen this weekend. But in addition to that, being able to follow up with that. So one of the things that I'd also like to see, maybe if we can work in here, is being able to fund some type of community additional community neighborhood improvement project. So rather than focusing on 2 blocks, maybe it's just a smaller project, or maybe it's an elder person that's struggling and just needs help with their spot or whatnot, and finding a way again to navigate through that. And maybe there's an opportunity for those trying to get back on their feet, whatever state that or situation they've been, to help address those needs. The downtown streets program, talked to a lot of people about that, and they were all very favorable of that concept of allowing people to work and earn their own. So that's something that I'm curious to see if we can work and expand that beyond just downtown. One thing that we continue to see escalate, I'm hearing it from our PD as well, is more incidences with our youth. I'm seeing it actually not just spread linearly, but actually exponentially as far as problems. I know the school district has their own funding, but I think one area that I don't think is within the scope, and something I'm hearing particularly from our women, particularly our women of color, is asking for self-defense classes, not just for their children, but also for themselves, and that's pretty sobering. Our incidences of domestic calls have actually gone down as far as domestic violence and child abuse have gone down previous few years, but we know that those situations are increasing, and that's coming back from the folks out in the field. And again, that's concerning. Am I trying to, should we have something that's just as far as defense? No, but it should, to me, it should be something that incorporates some type of mentorship as well, to again be able to streamline folks into these different training programs, again, so they can break the cycle that they've found themselves in, whatever they would be. But beyond that, again, I think really focusing on prevention and key within these issues that we see continuously anytime there's some type of recession or downturn in the economy, I think is key. So that way we don't lead to more drastic problems and add a lot more obstacles onto our law enforcement, particularly in our schools and our neighbors that are constantly reaching out to me with their concerns. So the last 2 items is neighborhood. I'm looking. Some of us are exploring into some type of neighborhood improvement plan. So that's something that I think, as long as it has a focus on building not just community, but also tying that into economic development, I think is really key as well. And the last one that I added on from Mr. Raycraft, the Habitat for Humanity, that particular proposal for the site, I think it's a fantastic proposal. Leads to home ownership in an area where there's very little home ownership opportunities, and I think it can really be something that's unique and stand out within our community, and for Habitat for Humanity as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Fantastic. We'll move to 9F, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is our regular update on COVID plus an update on AB 361. So we'll start with Fire Chief Chris Concepcion to start it off, and then he'll turn it over to our City Attorney, Melinda Stewart.
Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. I'm going to give you a real quick update on COVID, and then we'll pass it on to City Attorney Melinda Stewart. Next slide, please, Crystal. Not much has changed since the last 2 weeks since our previous council meeting. California is up to about 4.6 million cases and 71,000 deaths. There hasn't been much change, unfortunately, to the 7-day positivity. It's still at 2.1% in Solano County. we're up to 45,503 cases. The good thing is a lot fewer as compared to 2 weeks ago on the active cases, 323 active cases. Also, the number of people hospitalized has decreased, which is also good news. 7-day positivity, we're actually at a lower rate than the state, which is unusual. We have always been higher, so this is good news. As far as Vacaville is concerned, 11,950 cases, and that's 165 new cases in the last 2 weeks. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you some numbers as far as the vaccination rate in California. 80.4% of the eligible population has received at least one dose, and 72.6% of the population is fully vaccinated. Solano County is lagging a little bit behind California as a whole, and where we've got to 69% of the eligible population fully vaccinated. And then Vacaville is lagging behind. I don't have the numbers as far as the number of population that is fully vaccinated, but as compared to receiving at least one dose at 79% for Solano County, Vacaville is at 72.1%. And we are actually at the bottom as far as the cities as compared to the other cities in the county. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melinda Stewart for a discussion on renewing resolution 2021-088.
Thank you, Chief. Next slide, please. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the council. In addition to Chief Concepcion's update, this item also includes consideration of a resolution renewing the council's previous authorization to continue remote public meetings pursuant to Assembly Bill 361. At the special city council meeting on October 5th, based on data presented at that time, the council determined that holding in-person public meetings presented an imminent risk to health and safety, and council adopted resolution 2021-088 authorizing the continuation of remote meetings. That resolution is effective for 30 days, so until November 4th, 2021. And to give you some context, your next scheduled meeting after tonight is not until November 9th, so the resolution would have expired before your next city council meeting. So in order to continue meeting remotely under AB 361, the state of emergency must still be in effect, and the previous findings of health and safety risks must be considered periodically. Next slide, please. In considering the health and safety risks, we just heard from the fire chief regarding some of the latest local COVID-19 data. Additionally, currently nationwide, the Delta variant continues to be highly contagious and continues to result in significant rates of infection and has impacted both vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. As far as the state goes, we are still under a state of emergency. As far as Solano County goes, as you heard, our cases are dropping from the surge in August. However, the county does remain in the substantial transmission tier, which is 7.1 new cases per day per 100,000 in population. And also just for context, the next lower tier is the moderate transmission tier, which is 6 new cases per 100,000 population. So in Vacaville, in order to protect against transmission, some staff continue to work remotely, and the mask mandate is scheduled to remain in place inside city facilities until the county is in the moderate tier for 3 consecutive weeks. Next slide, please. So based on all of this information, staff is recommending adoption of the subject resolution, renewing resolution 2021-088, allowing for the continuation of remote public meetings for the next 30 days. And that concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open up public comment. I see no hands up. I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council. I see Councilmember Wiley. Go ahead.
I move that we adopt this that we vote on this.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Silva, second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Stockton,
No.
Councilmember Ritchie,
No.
Councilmember Silva,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Roulette.
Aye. Okay, we will move on to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to call attention to our first kickoff neighborhood cleanup event this weekend entitled Let's Make a Difference Day. I wanted to thank the council for their financial support and of that particular event. Lots of great work, and even more importantly, lots of goodwill was accomplished on Saturday. And it was through the efforts of a lot of hard work by a lot of staff that worked for weeks and months in advance to make sure that that event was a big success as it was, as well as a bunch of other staff and members from our community, as well as several council members that came out to really make a difference on Saturday. I would like to call out, Jill Childers, our fire marshal, who led the effort. But I just wanted to thank the council specifically for their efforts in supporting that event. And we will be putting together a presentation on that particular item to come back to the council at a future meeting, hopefully sooner than later, where we can highlight all the good work that was done, as well as provide the council with some numbers on what was accomplished that day. So again, thank you. And we look forward to making a difference in another area here sometime soon next year. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll move to council comments. And we'll start with Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Aaron, for that report. Just to, to say that, it made a difference is really an understatement on how transformative it was for the residents there. And just to make sure that everyone kind of understands, and it's something I didn't, eloquently state, and I probably still won't state right now eloquently, but a lot of folks in certain areas of our town, and, maybe it's COVID, but these things kind of existed long before then, is a lot of folks kind of feel left out or not really a part of our society. And what I saw Saturday was once again, how our community comes together when we have effective leadership that looks out for one another, not expecting anything in return, to just look out and lend a hand to our neighbors that are willing and wanting it. And, from Recology, those guys were awesome. Like coming in and pulling out, I forget how many loads of trash. I think we had at least 10 dumpsters coming in and out of there. Ace Hardware for their donations, Home Depot for their donations, Lowe's for their donations, Cool Patch donated a whole bed of truck of pumpkins, which were, always something that really makes a child smile. We all think back to those days. Rock Source for donating a lot of the material that was used for lawns. That was in high demand once they started getting dumped out. Valley Falls, Jerry's Painting for the paint. Sam's Club, Walmart, and the Vacaville Firefighters Association for also lending a hand, transporting different goods, and also cooking that meal, something that typically always, food is something that's always brought people together. Thanks for the council members that come out, and, quite honestly, Jill and your whole team, Fire Marshal Jill, I saw a lot in you, in your leadership, and to again, making a difference is an understatement. Like, your leadership, Chief Concepcion, your team, everybody that came through, or again, the fellow council members that came through, that really inspired those residents who felt they were forgotten, that they weren't, and that people actually cared about them and cared about their family members. What's really interesting, and just to kind of, despite what people view, and we see comments on social media quite often about the Markham neighborhood in general, that I don't want to repeat it, but one of the things that I was notified right at the end of the day, once that people had gone back to the weekend, was a fundraiser for a friend of a family member for their medical bills. And so they were selling pozole and mole. Not kind of rhyme, but they were doing a fundraiser, and I was like, why don't you tell us, and like, oh, this very, very humble, very appreciative people. And when we come together to help each other out, I was impressed. And now the trick for us, for us as public servants is how do we continue to build on that, and how do we continue to guide them on continuing to give back. And one way I had already seen that later that day, as I was walking back to my house from that area, was a lady yelling at a car to slow down. We just cleaned up our street. So it's absolutely amazing. So I can't state that enough, and I look forward to the presentation because it's absolutely something that, I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical of and didn't know how public or even the residents themselves would take it, but I'm sold. And thank you, Aaron, for that vision, and thank you all for everybody else for following through with that. We had a tremendous amount of rain, and man, so yet again, we've seen different members in our community try to step up and help out, not just take those, the pictures and the Instagram famous, but our public works, our police department, our fire department, they're absolutely phenomenal. Anytime something popped up, if the drainage was in that capacity, they were pretty much prompt on actually addressing it. So for everybody who was out there in the wet, in the rain, in the cold, absolutely appreciate you. Shout out to Officers Chris Hill and Officer Chad Hudson and Officers Russell and Murph. They actually came out yesterday and were able to engage a little over 50 aspiring kids, our future leaders in Scouts Pack 4. So thanks for coming in on your time off. I truly appreciate that. And that's it for tonight. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. Sorry. Sorry, Ron, or Mayor. I do want to thank the city of Suisun. This past Saturday, I think it was October 16th, if I recollect correctly. I do want to thank the city of Suisun and their staff for actually hosting the Alzheimer's Awareness Day. Saw a lot of great friends out there whose family members have been impacted with Alzheimer's. And, and it's just a way to make sure that we continue to stand up and remember and fight for a treatment for those who often can't remember and do it for themselves. So thank you, Suisun. Thanks.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you. I think it's wonderful. The community renewal project went well out there and was so receptive. I think anytime that you can go into a neighborhood and make a difference in the hearts and minds, but also something visible like that is absolutely outstanding. Thank you to everybody involved. I want to echo my appreciation for our public safety officers, which include, our police department, our fire department, and a huge standing ovation for our public works department for their efforts during that torrential downpour. Very scary to see how much rain we got. I think it was reported there was about 2 feet, I think, of Berryessa went up 2 feet in 24 hours, which is pretty crazy to think about that much rain. But I also want to thank our city planners. Where I live in North Village, there's 3, maybe 4, I think there's 3 large water overflow basins that were maxed out, but they held strong. And I know that there are areas in town. I've had some folks reach out to me over in Leisure Town, obviously here in District 1 in Browns Valley and in Vacaville and over here in North Village about some of the flooding. And I know that despite our best efforts, we're going to have some of that anytime you experience rain like that. But our planners that go through the process to make sure that we have these things in place, it really showed not only the day of with the work that everybody did, but the stuff that happens ahead of time. I also wanted to thank Public Works. I saw them out there today throughout District 1, and I assume throughout the entire city, going back and shoveling tan bark and getting our parks back up to snuff for the kids and families to go out there and enjoy. So Vacaville continues to shine through adversity and through whenever we experience these natural disasters. And so I just want to show my appreciation to all of them and the community members that went out, helped shovel sandbags, helped their neighbors out, checked on them. That's what we're all about here in Vacaville. So just outstanding job coming together in a tough time.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. So just want to take this opportunity to have we announce that District 5 is going to have our first quarterly town hall meeting on November 6th in Alamo Park from 1 to 3 p.m. We're going to be doing lots of different things. One of the big things is a meet and greet between myself, some city staff members, the new PD district commander. We're also going to cover some frequently asked questions to the city. And then we're also going to try to gain some feedback on what the district would like to see for our district as well as the city, and get topics for further meetings to build agendas that way. So I'm looking forward to meeting people and seeing everybody come out for that. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Yeah, so a couple quick updates. The first is Jeanette and I have been meeting on the Vacaville-Dixon Greenbelt. If you ever want to learn anything about 35-year-old easements and why the green spaces between Vacaville and Dixon, Jeanette and I are now experts. But all jokes aside, there is some talk about adjusting the easements and actually maybe increasing some of the businesses in that green space. So if any of the council members or have questions on kind of what that entails, I'd be happy to chat with you offline. Just want to give you a heads up that that's one of the work groups we're working on. Second update, the homeless 2x2 that we had with the county sort of morphed into a homeless 2x2 with all of the other cities in Solano, or most of the other cities in Solano. And Councilmember Stockton and I have been meeting with the county and the cities in some form or capacity now for about 6 months. We've got a plan that you heard a little bit of a preview from tonight with some of our discussions. We'll be bringing that back to you guys shortly. So very excited to kind of bring that back. I know we wanted to plan and we wanted something strategic and tangible. And I think there's a really exciting multi-city county collaborative project kind of coming back to council from those efforts. So thank you, Roy, for sitting on those groups with me, and just wanted to point out that's what's going on. I got the chance to attend the neighborhood cleanup event this weekend. Just phenomenal job. A huge kudos to City Manager Bush. I just really appreciate all of the efforts of yourself and the staff. Jill runs an extremely tight ship. It was just a flawless, perfect day. Just really grateful to all the staff members and volunteers that came out. And it was really cool to see Councilmember Silva kind of doing his thing. It was a great day all around. So just really appreciate everyone's efforts. Hoping city manager, maybe we can do some sort of formal thank yous with pictures for all the donors, and maybe council sign something, or I didn't realize so many different groups had donated to this event. So if we could do something formal and special for them, that would be awesome, because that's a huge donation. And then kind of parroting, similar to what my other council members said, about a huge thank you to Public Works and Public Safety this weekend. I live right along the creek on Southwood Drive. Very scary weekend, had the road closures on and off, but Public Works kept it running. The police department and fire department were out there making sure no one got hurt. Just a really, really good job. And then lastly, a big thank you to Chief Concepcion. We wrangled a rowdy troop of Boy Scouts last week in City Hall and kind of gave them an hour and a half preview on what the city does. I think there were probably about 20 of them. So just thank you for staying late. And thank you for your time. It was great hanging out with you and speaking with the Boy Scouts. Thank you, everybody.
Councilmember Wiley.
All right, here's one more shout out to the Make a Difference Day, because it was great to attend and to see everyone working together to make a difference. So great efforts on the part of all the people who worked on that. And I believe that Council Member Silva is correct in saying, communication is the key. And so I have been reaching out and trying to work with the residents in District 6. And I am attending a meeting for one of the successful neighborhood watches and seeing if we can, set up other neighborhood watches in District 6 as well. It's so great to see the one in Country Village work together so well. And also, I was really happy that the city was so proactive and able to deal with things during all the rain on Sunday. And it's just another evidence of climate change, which I think we need to address. And in the consent calendar today, we did approve the work going forward for the electric charging stations at the buses. And so I just wanted to mention that since it was in the consent calendar. So that we had a good discussion on that a couple of meetings ago. So it is important that we can do as much as we can for climate and energy in our role. And as the Greenbelt mentioned by Vice Mayor Sullivan, I am taking a little tour on Salad Cosmos this Friday to see their work with agriculture in a different way in their building. And so that will be interesting as well. So thank you very much for all your work.
Councilmember Roberts, I believe you wanted to recuse yourself for something at closed session.
Yes, sir. Just avoiding any potential conflicts. I'm recusing myself of participating in the sections of 12 Alpha or 12A to the extent that relate to the Police Officer Association. The reason I'm doing this because I currently have a family member that was recently hired by the police department that currently resides with me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And before we go to closed session, I know that almost every member mentioned it, and I'm sure every member is thinking it. But yeah, our staff, and I know we talked about public safety, public works, but our administration, city manager, all the way down, they opened up the emergency center quickly. They stayed on top of everything, making sure that everyone was safe in Vacaville. This was rain that we've never seen before, and I think everyone from the very top to the very, very outside did everything, and I just can't tell you how much we appreciate it. So we'll move to closed session. There's going to be nothing to report out, so good night, Vacaville.